Hello. Welcome to my stream. Starting off well, I see. I'm happy to see that Redeem Zoomer's in the chat. Hopefully this is all going well. Hopefully my internet connection is good. Hopefully, hold up, I gotta turn off this. This is mostly just gonna be a chill stream. I literally did not plan on doing a stream today. I'm got finals and stuff this week and next week, so all the videos that have been coming out on my channel have been pre-recorded, and I had a long day of studying today and of doing stuff like that. So I'm just taking a break to do this little chill stream and talk. And the topic I'm going to start with is going to be Superlapsarianism, because that's what I've been thinking about in my head. And I swear I'll stop doing videos that are just about Reformed theology and things like that soon. But that's what I've been thinking about a lot and processing a lot. I got a haircut and everything too. Good to see you, the other Paul as well. If you guys, hold up, let me have my. Oh no, we're gonna have that weird light thing where it changes hue over and over again. Yeah. Hello. It seems good to see that everyone is finding their way into this impromptu stream. Let me make a little tweet about it. Let me tweet together. Everyone can hear me well? Wait, if you got any questions for me, folks, let me know. Ask them in the thing. Okay. All right. I'm definitely not becoming Presbyterian, folks. Not becoming Presbyterian. Don't worry. Yeah. Oh, geez. It's going to do the light thing. Hopefully we can get that to stop. Good to hear. Hey, man, you, Paul, Jonah, River, and James have helped me out a lot attending an ACC church tomorrow. That's great. Super pumped about that. We could talk about continuing Anglicanism, too, in a minute, actually, if we want to. All right, so what's up with Supralapsarianism? If you have been following Redeemed Zoomer, and maybe he's listening now, or maybe not, you know that he has just talked about a lot about Superlapsarianism. At the same time he was looking into it, I was looking into it, and I actually got this book, which I could would totally recommend to anyone interested in just theology and philosophy, especially scholastic theology. It's called Ordered by Love, and it's an introduction to John Duns Scotus. Looking into Scotus can be hard because a lot of his original stuff is in Latin, of course, and it's not as well distributed, and it's hard to get a hold of him. He's not like Thomas Aquinas where you can just pick up a Summa somewhere. So getting into him is hard, and you can find some online resources, and I was delving into those before I delved into this, especially on Scotus's doctrine of election, which this doesn't talk about as much. This is mostly focused on a lot of his his ontology, epistemology, the idea of univocity and all those kinds of things, which are more philosophical that he's engaging in. Let me see if I can turn this on. That'll help with the lighting stuff. So there's that. But talking specifically about election. Oh, geez. Gosh, I hope this isn't as frustrating to you guys watching the light go crazy. Yeah. So Scotus's premise, and I want to try to draw this out. Right. So I tweeted this morning. Let me just read the tweet full sail because I want to be precise. I think people think Superlapsarianism is hyper-Calvinism. I was listening to Jordan P. Cooper. I love Jordan P. Cooper, but he has a video on Sola Deo Gloria, and he was kind of describing the different positions in the Reformed view. And, by the way, kind of base that in any conversation about Sola Deo Gloria, you accidentally have to bring up the Reformed. He basically assumes that's their guiding principle, that the Reformed guiding principle is for the glory of God alone. But he basically does a canvas of that, and then he talks about the difference between supra and infralapsarianism. And like many people, when he's describing Superlapsarianism, he's just describing hyper-Calvinism, right? So the tweet I tweeted was Superlapsarianism is just the idea that God loved, okay, before he condemned. And love is God's mercy in the unconditional love, and that we know that God is love. God is love in a way that he's not wrath. There's no part of the Bible where it says God is wrath. And so God is love as an actual proper description of him, of God, of God's essence and nature. Of course, God is divinely simple, but love is an accurate way of understanding God. We can say justly, God is love. Okay, right? We're not even saying God is loving. It's not a trait that God possesses. It's just that God is love. Okay, but that condemnation that occurs to humans is in response to human sin. So it's extrinsic relationship. It's not proper to God's nature. God relates to humanity because of God's perfect holiness. When we sin, God condemns sin. So that's the extrinsic relationship present between God and man that is conditional on man's sin. Okay. You're gonna check some of the comments. Rave. I know the lighting. I think it's fixed itself. How's it going, Joe? It's going well. It's going well. The beauty of the Anglican tradition is the breadth and width of theological exploration allowed within the tradition. Sometimes it's a hindrance, but you are giving an example of how it can work well. Thank you so much. And I want to talk about Scotus and the British Isles and Reformed theology and scholasticism a lot before I kind of just start going off and talking about whatever I want. Yeah, totally true. Okay. So what the Supralapsarian is saying is not that, let's see if I can get like a graph about the order of decrees. Right, so people talk about the logical order of decrees. Some people have problems with this. Jordan B. Cooper in his most recent video is like, we don't really, as Lutherans, he says, we don't worry about the logical order of decrees. And that's a stance I respect. I respect not caring about it, but also just looking into the medieval scholastic tradition, people were talking about it. And it really wasn't something worth dividing over. I think we can all agree that it wasn't something worth dividing over. But nonetheless, it's interesting to think about. Decrees. And so you'll get different articulations of this, that, and the other thing. Let me see if I can. Yes, I hold to the 39 articles, by the way. Slides. No. Share screen. Window. No. Okay. Can we see this? Can we see this? Okay. It's about the order of decrees. Okay. And logical order of decrees is not temporal order of decrees, right? Logical is my parents logically preceded me in the mind of God, because in order for me to exist, they had to exist logically. Okay. I'm not saying that, God's decrees are in time. They're outside of time. We would all agree with that. God's infinite, right? Oh gosh, is there like a bunch of sound effects and sound problems? I don't know. Okay. All right. So let's talk about logical order of decrees. And I actually think there's a problem with this chart, but we'll talk about it in a second. Okay. The question is, okay, especially in the Reformed world, is did God elect the saved, those who are elected, who he's referring to in Ephesians, who are elected before the foundation of creation? Okay. Did he elect those people before the fall or after the fall? And I think, and this is Scotus's point, the simple reading of Ephesians 1, let's pull it up. Okay, I'm gonna quote it for you guys. The simple reading of Ephesians. Okay, Ephesians 1:4. Okay, or let's just read 1:3-4. Okay, blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who blessed us in Christ with every spiritual blessing in the heavenly places, even as he chose us in him. This is going to be big for Scotus, and this is going to be big for my articulation here. Even as he chose us in him before the foundation of the world, that we should be holy and blameless before him. Okay? So when he chose us before the foundation of the world, it was so that we would be holy and blameless. Okay? In Christ. So the Superlapsarian is going to say that before the fall, which is obviously after creation and God creating human beings, okay, he elected some unto salvation. Okay, in Christ, emphasis on in Christ. And what Scotus is going to point out, and I think Theodore Beza in the Reformed tradition after him will be, okay, Christ is the Alpha and Omega, right? Revelations 22. Okay, let me see if I can highlight that as well. Revelations 22:13, I believe. Yeah, Revelation 22:13. Okay, Jesus says, "I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first letter and the last letter, the first and the last, the beginning and the end." So when you think about how things are logically ordered, okay, when you think about how things are logically ordered, say I'm hungry, okay, my will is to satisfy my hunger. Now that entails getting a meal. So, but I need to get a meal. I need to make a meal. So I need to go to the grocery store. I need to get into the car. All of those things are in reverse order of the things that the thing I desire. And so the thing that I first desired is actually the last in order of events. We literally get explicitly that Christ is the Alpha and the Omega in Revelation, right? So, oh gosh, I didn't even see the comments going up. Hey, Redeemed Zoomer's back. Good. Bueno. Oh, Supralapsarianism isn't actually a position, but not referring to my name Sub Umbra. But. I know, chill stream allegedly. Perpendicular. Yeah, I don't even know what all these other titles are. I'm not gonna lie. I should maybe have looked up that before. Okay. Hey yo, hello. All right. Maybe I'll send you guys links to hop on and later if you're down. But all that the Superlapsarian is going to say is that election preceded the fall because we are elected in Christ, and Christ was the object of all creation. He was the point. And that all of the world is ordered by love of Christ. So God loves. He can't help it. It's in God's nature. God loves. Okay? Yeah, totally agree. The diagram is not accurate, and I'm going to talk about it in a second. God loves. God loves the highest things. God loves the good. God is the good. And so God loves himself, right? This is kind of the Augustinian view of the Trinity, right? You get this idea of subject, verb, object. I talk about this in my predestination video. But the love shared between the Father and the Son is the Holy Spirit, right? That's where we even get the Trinitarian life. The Son is kind of the object of the Father's love, and the Father is the subject. And so love is the whole point of all of this, of everything that ever happened. Okay? So when God made creation, he made it in light of his love of Christ. He wants to glorify Christ. The purpose is the glorification of Christ. And that's what precedes creation. And so in Christ, logically, human beings were elected in Christ, unto Christ, to glorify Christ. That was the purpose, right? Of that act of election. Now, this a lot of people who don't understand Supralapsarianism or think it's hyper-Calvinism will say, oh, in that election, he's also not electing some people. Those people he's actively reprobating. But that's not the Supralapsarian position, because reprobation is in light of the fall, right? Nobody is saying, except for some hyper-Calvinists, probably, that God actively reprobates people, that God desires to see people. The reprobation is in light of. Okay, maybe Redeemed Zoomer disagrees. Right? Reprobation is different. Actually, I should be careful about my categories. God condemns people in light of the fall. Maybe I should say instead of reprobation. Reprobation could just be the passing over, and so of course God does pass over people. I should be specific. Yeah, reprobation isn't the same as damnation. You're right. You caught me up in a little linguistic slip. Yeah, damnation is in light of the fall. Yeah. Yes. Okay, that is what I meant to say. I misspoke. All right. Yes. Okay. Now that that's been cleared up. So God creates human beings in light of the whole process of election and the glorification of Christ. That's Supralapsarianism. maybe not. Maybe. All right. So also, this isn't the claim, and I've tried to point this out as well. This isn't the claim that God doesn't love the non-elect. God loves. That's a part of his nature. In some sense, what we're going to want to say is that, and this is, I think, people actually, funnily enough, in the Eastern Orthodox tradition emphasize this better, but God's relationship with human beings is marred by sin. And so in a way, God even loves the people he's condemning because of their sin. That's why he's condemning sin, and that's why all this is even happening, because of his love of Christ. Right? So, all right, that's the Superlapsarian position. Yeah, versus the infralapsarian position, of course, is that God created human beings. The fall is authorized or allowed to occur because of the free will of Adam and Eve, which we would agree, right? Adam and Eve had free will in the garden and chose this, chose that. This is another thing, if you think about it, right? What would the Superlapsarian think would have happened if Adam and Eve chose righteousness in the garden? There still would have been the elect in Christ. That's what we're saying. There still would have been an election in Christ before the foundation of the earth, before the all right, hold up, watch this. Yeah. All right. All right. Yeah. So that's it, folks. Is that so hard to understand? Is it? And I think it's actually it's a lot more reasonable, like the tweet I made this morning, when you think about it, as all the Superlapsarian is saying is that God's loving decree of election preceded, in order of logic, God reacting to human sin, because that's an extrinsic relationship, an extrinsic property of God. And I think there's actually a lot of the Bible that hints at that, and we can talk about that later. Hello.
What's up? I'm like the liberals in the PC USA. I hijack every stream you ever do.
I appreciate it, though. It's a lot more fun than when the mainline churches get hijacked.
Yeah. So go on. It seems like you've read more about Supralapsarianism and Scotus than I have at this point.
Well, that's another thing I actually wanted to point out too, that I realized. I think that the Scotistic distinctions, like Scotism or really Franciscan theology compared to Thomistic theology, have a bit of a different concern than I think what ends up becoming the concern in the Reformed scholastic distinctions, and sometimes they're different. So, like, Scotus is the reason he cares about Supralapsarianism at all is because he wants to emphasize the primacy of God's will and love and the absolute primacy of Christ. Of course, he infamously uses this to argue for the Immaculate Conception, which we can talk about if that checks out or not. But so the only context that I've looked into, because I actually started looking into this before I even was looking into predestination in the same way, or was thinking about predestination in the Protestant language, and I was just interested in Scotus. And so Scotus's concerns are the ones that I'm kind of thinking about.
Right. Supralapsarianism in the Reformed context does seem to talk more about soteriology and predestination, more so than like the wills of God and stuff. But you do have Puritans like Thomas Goodwin who say radically Christological Supralapsarian statements, so much so that it's like significantly more than even Athanasius would say. I think he said that Christ did not come into the world for us, but we came into the world for Christ. That's a Puritan Thomas Goodwin, very Supralapsarian. Like that's more Supralapsarian than the Nicene Creed. Like the Nicene Creed does say, for us, Christ came into the world. And Athanasius is weird because a lot of times he sounds like he's an infralapsarian because he says all this happened for us, for Adam's sin. He even has a few statements saying like, if it weren't, the only reason that there's the incarnation was our need. But I think the context of that is Arians arguing that Christ is a creation by essence. And he's like, no, the only reason Christ has any physical form is because we needed it. I think Athanasius does contradict himself. I think he doesn't realize that he's contradicting himself. But what Athanasius does say, which is Supralapsarian, is that the incarnation itself deifies us, and that we can't be deified without the incarnation. Now, Lane Tipton, I'm not sure if you know who he is.
No.
there's this Reformed Forum is this online channel that really popularizes the theology of Westminster Seminary, like a popular Reformed seminary. They have good content, but they treat it like their school of thought, the Van Til, Charles Hodge, J. Gresham Machen theology is like the only type of Reformed theology. So Lane Tipton has this very, very cringe infralapsarian theology. He said, the incarnation does not save and does not deify. It just means to an end.
Ooh.
And if you say the incarnation does not deify, you're directly contradicting Athanasius. It says the incarnation does deify. So I think that Athanasius is a very, I think you could see, I think he makes infralapsarian and superlapsarian statements and doesn't realize that they contradict each other. I think Scotus really takes his some of his superlapsarian ideas and runs with it.
Yeah, I think also that's actually a good point, because I think before the Reformation, the emphasis on this debate was the incarnation, and the incarnation was this kind of elevated. So Scotus is talking about, would Christ have become united to a human nature if not for the fall? And he wants to say, of course, because he's talking about, because to Scotus, and I think this is a good distinction to make even for people who don't like kind of the ideas of election and predestination, is that Scotus says the point of election originally even was the incarnation and to unite us to the divine nature. So that would happen even without the fall, is kind of his point, because otherwise, like, that's the point of the incarnation primarily. And he of course is clear to say that in our world, the way that it played out, one of the important parts of the incarnation, so much so that you could say that the incarnation was for and for our sins and all that kind of stuff. But he's saying it still would have happened anyway. And that's super important to Scotus, is the kind of primacy of the incarnation, and that it would have, trying to protect it as a valuable, as kind of keeping deification central, all those kinds of things. And that's kind of what he wants to emphasize.
Right. I agree that post-Reformation, the emphasis is much more on soteriology. And someone's saying, am I going to become Anglican? Well, there's a very good Presbyterian scholastic, Samuel Rutherford, who is radically Scotistic in his thoughts on God's will, because he says, contrary to standard Protestant orthodoxy, that God actually did not have to punish sin. God could have decided not to punish sin without sending Christ to sacrifice. He says that Christ's sacrifice was because God willed it. Rutherford has a very strong view of the primacy of the will. Rutherford is very superlapsarian, very Scotistic, and not just predestination, but his whole view. So even post-Reformation, there is a lot of speculation and theology done on like the God's will versus God's intellect and the incarnations. Samuel Rutherford is my favorite of all the scholastics. He's great.
Yeah, I think actually, and maybe we can elaborate on this, but I actually think Scotus, in a way, is kind of a proto-Protestant. And the problem is a lot of the people that really care about Scotus are like devoted Roman Catholics, so they don't want to point out all this stuff. But I think I messaged you about this. Vermigli cites Scotus a bunch of times. He explicitly sides with Scotus against Thomas on this idea about the primacy of the will over the primacy of God's intellect. And he thinks that we are predestined on the basis of God's will, not on basis of God's intellect, which is a Franciscan idea. I think it technically started with Bonaventure, but Vermigli just definitely agrees with that. I do think he's technically infralapsarian, but he does want to kind of emphasize the point of God's will, emphasizing, again, even Soli Deo Gloria, you can kind of see in Scotus. He doesn't have the same concern. If you think about it, a big part of the Reformation, I think, was, but don't humans have free will? Like, kind of trying to justify it from the human perspective, like, it's like a system of salvation. But then the Protestants want to be like, no, God is in control. God, it's all about glorifying God. Westminster Confession, I think, says, gosh, I'm going to butcher it, about the glory of God, that the purpose of man is to glorify God.
The chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever.
Yeah. And that's kind of, you can see that totally in Scotus. Scotus also has a reformed view of the sacraments before he's reprimanded at Fort Lateran. So
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
no, I don't think Scotus was a proto-Protestant. I think he
Yeah.
was a Protestant.
Yeah.
Well, so I recently learned that his sacramental view is that sacraments are moral causes of salvation, not physical causes of salvation, and that is exactly what Samuel Rutherford says about the efficacy of the sacraments as well. Um, but the big thing is on justification. I think Scotus is also Protestant because he says that forgiveness of sins and the infusion of righteousness are two different things. That is a proto way of saying that justification and sanctification are two different things. I think Thomistic philosophy requires you to have a Roman Catholic view of justification because in Thomism, this radical realism, God can't forgive your sins without actually making you more forgivable. It would be a legal fiction, like they call it, a legal fiction. You need to have a high view of God's will where he could just declare you righteous without you being righteous. That's why they sometimes say Martin Luther was a nominalist for that. He's not a nominalist. He's a Scotist. I don't think he's actually a Scotist. Martin Luther is not a philosopher at all. He does not think about philosophy. So sometimes he'll say things that sound this way, that way, up, down, right, left.
He's not as precise. Actually, I would say it's interesting because Vermigli, in a lot of ways, because he was originally he was trained scholastically and he was a monk, and he totally is playing into all these categories. Versus when I read Calvin, I just don't see the categories at all, or especially not with Martin Luther. Just listening to Bondage of the Will, and he's more of a polemicist, in my opinion, sometimes than he is a precise scholastic in that sense.
I think there's a reason the Catholic Church largely I know that there's a lot of Scotist Catholics today, like my friend the Byzantine Scotist, but there's a reason the Catholic Church sided with Thomas over Scotus because Thomas is Roman Catholic and Scotus is Protestant. Of course, the big exception is that the Thomists were skeptical of the Immaculate Conception. The Scotists were hardcore. But if you think about it, the Immaculate Conception, like a high Mariology, does not inherently contradict Protestant theology. I'm not saying I believe in it. I don't. I don't think it is inherently opposed to it.
Yeah. It wasn't as big of an issue for the Protestant reformers as it is for like your average evangelical. The Mariology issues.
Heinrich Bullinger believed in the bodily assumption of Mary. And of course, the perpetual virginity. Everyone believed in that. Heinrich Bullinger had about as high Mariology as you possibly could while still being reformed.
Yeah. Totally true. And it's interesting because Protestants get accused. So the other Paul's comment is the key accusation is a voluntarism. It's flatly false due to God's forgiveness not being baseless and arbitrary, but grounded on Christ's perfect righteousness. That's the accusation that Protestants get. But it's also one of the accusations laid against Scotus when he is talking to people in the Middle Ages. People accuse him of voluntarism. And that's one of the things he has to kind of rebut. It's funny because, actually, I think this was technically true about Aquinas, actually, while he was alive or when he started being a scholastic. But they both faced a lot of pushback at the time when they first started writing stuff. And people accused them of being heretics and all that kind of stuff. I brought this up before, but being called a dunce, like an idiot, it comes from John Duns Scotus. So, and like we said before, Scotus had a more Protestant view of the Lord's Supper, but he did definitely have a high ecclesiology because when the Fourth Lateran condemned that view, he made a thing to change his mind. Some people will try to say like, well, of course he said that in public, but who knows what his actual ecclesiology was and this anything. But I do think Scotus did have he was a medieval Catholic. He had a high view of the authority of the church. And to be fair, actually, from what I understand, his whole defense of the Immaculate Conception was in an attempt to defend the doctrine that he felt was received by the church. So he did definitely have a high, but as an Anglican, we would probably affirm that. I always want to maybe wonder if
as a mainline Protestant, I would affirm that. I think the view of the church, like a lower view of the church, is accidental to Protestantism, not essential, because if the Reformation had succeeded, if Martin Luther's 95 Theses had been received well and they'd made the changes, all the reformers would have had just as high ecclesiology as the medieval Catholics. Especially as a mainline Protestant, I think fundamentally the church is sinning if it's not being as united as possible. That's why even you'll see like PCUSA pastors literally trying to say that the Pope is part of the same church as them in some way, trying to say that they're in the same church as the Pope, because that's why you have like the World Council of Churches, which I think is fundamentally a good thing. Even if there's liberalism that represents the Protestant churches there, the conservatives should start representing more. So I would say, yes, Scotus had a high ecclesiology, but so should we.
Yeah, totally agree. I was going to completely agree with that. I think, there's an interesting distinction. Gosh, I'm going to misquote who said this. I think it was Richard Hooker, maybe it was Jeremy Taylor, in talking to Huguenots. So like someone who had a very high view of the episcopate, maybe it was John Cosin, an Anglican who had a very high view of the necessity of the episcopate, was talking to a Huguenot who was like a French Reformed who were being persecuted, and he was like, "Oh, do you not think we have a legitimate church here in France because we don't have bishops?" And he said that in his mind there was a distinction between the necessities of the church in France under persecution, under a king who was not supporting the Reformation, and then of course he's comparing that to British Presbyterians who weren't facing persecution, and he thought that it was kind of problematic to, even though you could have bishops. And I think actually in that time the Scottish church had specifically gotten rid of their bishops. Like they had them as a Protestant church and then got rid of bishops. And so he thought that was problematic because it was kind of a positional striving towards something. I think the same thing can be said about general unity, where like if you find yourself in a situation where, it's not entirely your fault, you're striving towards unity, but it's not happening, I think that's probably more positive than someone who doesn't even seek it, who doesn't want it, who rejects it. I think same thing can be said about some kind of retreatist denominations in the United States.
I'd fundamentally agree. I think unity should be like, I think the ideal model that all the denominations should strive for is kind of what the mainline Protestant churches have now, which is where they have altar and pulpit fellowship. They can take communion together. They exchange ministers, even though there still is distinction in terms of their heritage and organizations and stuff, because we can't realistically expect them to all become one. I agree with you that the striving for something, even if you don't have it, is good enough. Although I would disagree on the episcopate. I would say that because, I'm still Presbyterian. Everything's going to become Anglican. The early church was a Presbyterian church. I'm just saying. Yeah. But anyway.
we could have a conversation about that too. I think that would be interesting because I think this is another one of those examples, like we were talking about how people from outside Superlapsarianism tend to think it's hyper Calvinism when it's not on the inside.
Yeah.
What Anglican view from even in the most, like there's a Anglo-Catholic named Vernon Staley who's like very Anglo-Catholic, Father Calvin Robinson loves Vernon Staley, right? And if you read his on the Catholic religion, he even says that the reason in the Bible there's no distinction between bishop and presbyter is because the apostles are still alive. So he agrees that there is in certain passages of the Bible a univocity, like they're the same office in those passages, if not just different titles for like insignificant distinction, but just that in the classical Anglican position on the episcopate, it's just that the Anglican view would be that the episcopate, as the apostles died off, the bishops were the ones that were elevated into that 3-tier ministry, right? We just think there are 3 tiers to the offices of the church, and that because there are 3, there were always going to be 3. Yeah, Paul will get on soon. And that there were always going to be 3. That's why there were 3 when the apostles were around. It would, in our opinion, actually contradict our view that 3 tiers is the necessary tiers if while the apostles were around, bishops were distinct. If that makes sense.
Yeah. The number 3's got to be preserved.
Yeah.
Well, thing is, basically everyone admits that the early church was Presbyterian, even Catholics. They would just say it was a development after that, a good and necessary development. Like Catholic historical claims are a lot more believable because they allow for development of doctrine. It's the Eastern Orthodox claims that are completely untenable because they claim that everything was always the same, that the apostles and the apostolic fathers were venerating icons and talking about toll houses and all those things.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I've been thinking about how to articulate this, but especially after having looked into the history of the kind of Western view on predestination, and like even that specifically, I think you basically get to a point where looking at church history, this is going to sound so bad, but take it what you will. You either accept that there is a type of thing that's development of doctrine that is allowed to occur and is good for the church. And I think you can cite, Paul, like in Galatians, talking about how heresies come into the church for the trial of the church to better the church. And then, or you totally reject it as a category and become an Anabaptist, in my opinion, where like you have to try to do this crazy reconstruction of exactly what it was like in the first generation of the church. And I'm not saying that the first generation of the church actually were Anabaptists, but I mean the kind of way that Anabaptists view the burden of proof for any doctrine is like extreme. Like there's no room at all for kind of saying like, well, our language got clearer as time went on, those kinds of things. We reject the idea of the first four councils, all of that kind of stuff. And I think that that's kind of the inconsistency, in my opinion, of some of the Eastern polemics, where they kind of try to portray themselves as not having any development of doctrine in any sense. But then, like, if you just look at the church for the first millennium, it looks like that was not like a problem. Even St. Vincent de Lorraine talks about development of doctrine.
Yeah, Karl Barth is very good on this because he says theology is a science. Like theology is called the queen of the sciences in the Middle Ages. And every science develops over time and actually gets better with time. So in general, you'll hear people saying, it sounds like whether you're talking to a Lutheran or an Orthodox or anyone, they make it sound like theology gets worse over time. That the apostles had the perfect theology, then every generation since then it's gotten worse and worse and worse. And that means earlier means better. That's not how science works. The way science works is you learn more over time. So even though there's always going to be new heresies and stuff, just the way there's always like flat earthers and stuff, the understanding of theology from the right, camp is always going to be improving, I think. So if theology is a science, it's not just repeating what the past people said.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, there's a sense in which it's like science and that clarification element, but I do think, like, to be true to at least the Anglican tradition, the way we would talk about it is that the farther back you go, the purer doctrine gets, or the less clear that it gets. And then as time goes on, you still have that maintenance, that Holy Spirit protection of the pure doctrine, and then it gets more clear. So like we get more language as time goes on. That's kind of the way we would talk about it. And that's good. Like we like that it's getting, like, it's not just a, an error. Like, I don't know if you watched Jordan Cooper's recent video. He uploaded today, I think, about Soli Deo Gloria, but he kind of talks about kind of the Lutheran criticisms of the medieval scholastic tradition. And he carries that over to the Reformed tradition, because it's like, well, why are we asking these questions? Why are we talking about these issues? And again, I think you either have to say, like, you're right, we can't talk about these things. We can't have, clarify our terminology more. We can't, talk about the order of Christ's decrees or whatever, which I can agree is not as important as, like, say, soteriology or whatever. But like, or it's okay, and it's actually good for theology to elaborate on these questions over time. And I think that, the Reformed tradition has been like pretty much a general, yes, it's good to elaborate. It's good to have, systematic theology where we talk about these things. The Lutheran tradition has been a little iffy, because there are Lutheran scholastics actually, but they're like, the Roman Church has definitely been in favor of that kind of way of talking, and then the Eastern Church has been very negative about.
That's why I like Roman Catholicism a lot better than Orthodoxy, because Roman Catholicism allows for development of doctrine, allows for seeing theology as a science, where you investigate more and more. And that's why the Roman Catholic Church did science. And the Eastern Orthodox Church theology is just about repeating what your ancestors said. And maybe you clarify some things, but the only clarification is ever when a heretic shows up, then you just make a statement so everyone knows who the heretics are. But I think the reason Eastern Orthodoxy has that mindset, that's kind of why science didn't come from the East. It's kind of why I think it's why Beethoven, Mozart, and Bach didn't come from the East. And yes, there was Tchaikovsky, but he was writing in a fundamentally Western style. I'm the most radically pro-West, theology guy on the internet, but I think
we got to talk about this too. Okay, so I think there's this, and I think people today are kind of doing this kind of, oh, where did our society go wrong problem. And I think there's a tendency or a feeling or an instinct that I think leads people to Eastern Orthodoxy eventually, but that I think Roman Catholics accidentally play into, where they'll notice, oh, the progress train, Roman Catholics will say, started with the Reformation, and the progress train is bad, and then that got us to modern progress, right?
Yeah.
Because the Protestants rejected an authority, and people today reject authorities. So that's the same thing exactly. And they'll notice that, like, Protestant countries, I think you've talked about this a little bit, but Protestant countries are more liberal, but really it's just prosperity. I mean, like, you just look at like Latvia, they're a pretty conservative country and they're also Protestant. And if you look at like Czechia, technically the Czech Republic was a Catholic country and now it's really atheistic. So there's outliers, and really I think with prosperity. But then you'll see Eastern people be like, actually, the real problem that started this progress train was like, I don't know, the Filioque or something, or St. Augustine, or
Don't you know that Augustine led in the Filioque led to Drag Queen Story Hour?
Yeah, exactly.
No, I've had Orthodox people argue that the Filioque, thinking that the spirit comes from the word, the logos, had caused people to have more of a logical spirituality, which led to atheism and all that. I think something that changed my entire outlook is to quit trying to retrace our steps to see where we went wrong, to try and go back the progress train, because how far back you have to go to get to the good old days, it's endless. It's endless. And there never has been a successful conservative movement of going back. That's why I no longer call myself a conservative, because you can't go back in time, and if you did, you just wind up right back where you are now. I think we need to progress beyond progressivism into Christianity. I think Christianity needs to become the new left, the new progressivism. And that would fit with a Protestant view of history. Protestantism needs to stop trying to beat the Eastern Orthodox at their own argument. We have to admit that, yes, we're progressive, but we have to reshape progressive to be a good thing, because everyone enjoys progress. Everyone online, all the Orthobros are enjoying the internet and iPhones and modern science. So if you say science is fake and gay while tweeting on an iPhone, so that's what I think. I think we need to embrace Christian progressivism, which isn't the same as progressive Christianity. It's Christian progressivism.
Yeah, kind of progressing towards a more Christian society. It's interesting too, because actually we talked about this also in like kind of messages, but like Abraham Kuyper talks about what he thinks kind of started the modernism train.
Yeah.
He's got his explanation too, and he thinks it's people abandoning Calvinism. Basically, he thinks that there's this in Calvinism, in his opinion, there's a strong emphasis that human beings are sinful. We can't look to ourselves for the solutions. We have to look to God. And then he kind of blames the French Revolution. I don't even know if he makes the link towards Jesuits, but I've heard some Protestants talk about this, but like the Jesuitical kind of reliance on free will and like, our merit and us, and we can make the good society, and kind of the kind of progressivism in the Roman tradition that he would say is really the kind of modernistic evil, the reason we have, in his opinion, like kind of liberal theology. And so everybody kind of associates their theology, in my opinion, with like good being based, and then there's a deviation from their theology that actually explains the evil in society. But I really think actually what's happening is Satan has to take whatever is present in any society and try to take something that people aren't assuming or aren't critical of and turn that into something evil, if that makes sense. The example I'll give to this for like Eastern Orthodox people who think that this isn't the case of their societies is if you read like the Brothers Karamazov, this is before the Russian Revolution, but it's clear to Dostoevsky, at least, that the tensions that would become the Russian Revolution, that kind of socialist mindset, were present in Russian society at the beginning. He even explicitly says that the Russian view of the relationship between church and state is a kind of socialism. Like Ivan says that if you read Brothers Karamazov, right? So every society has their kind of warped version. Every theology has its kind of warped version that's actually antithetical to Christianity. And so you can't say, oh, well, there is this version of your ideology that's warped, so that means your actual original tradition is cringe. because I do think there is a valid idea about the genealogy of kind of American kind of progressivism, activism. Like if you just read the way people talked about evangelicals and abolitionists in like the 19th century, they sound like they're talking about libtards. Like they talk about moral busybodies who don't want you to drink, and they cancel everybody for doing this. They boycott industries they don't like because they're supporting something that they think is sinful. And you can draw a parallel if you want to. And I think that's just because, well, evangelicalism was so common in the United States. That kind of activist culture was something in the United States. And so when we got atheists picked up on that activism culture and then detached it from Christianity. Simple as. It's not really actually properly related to Christianity, in my opinion, anymore.
I think they're both true. I think Kuyper's right that progressivism comes from a deviation from Calvinism. Its view of humanity is the polar opposite of Calvinism. It's as high as possible view of humanity. But I think that Satan targets whatever is the biggest threat to his kingdom. There's no liberal hijack of Mormonism. There's no liberal hijack of Jehovah's Witnessism. No liberal hijack of Islam.
Yeah.
Orthodox say, oh, Calvinism's wrong, Protestantism's wrong because it got hijacked by liberals. Okay, you could apply that argument to say why Christianity's wrong because it got more hijacked than Islam. I think that Satan targets whatever's the biggest threat to his kingdom, and Satan exploits whatever weaknesses there are in a system. I think there were weaknesses in Protestantism that got exploited, and that's why we have liberalism. I think I own the fact that the Calvinist societies became the most progressive and globalist. I still like Calvinism because Calvinism gave the world enough progress that could happen. I think it's going to be like a phoenix. Nothing, nowhere is safe from progressivism. It's called progressive for a reason. It's a cancer. I think that the first places to completely collapse are going to be the first places to get reborn like a phoenix. So I think we need to head into the biggest liberal crap holes, which are the historically Calvinist places like New England and stuff. And that's where the things will rise from the ashes. So it'll be Protestants building up something new, rooted in what came before, while the Orthodox and Muslim societies are going to be dealing with their progressivism for the first time. Because like Greece recently legalized gay marriage. Nothing is safe. Nowhere is safe. And that's why I'm so opposed to retreatism, because like you could split off and form a new denomination. That's eventually going to go woke.
Yeah.
So I think you need to just embrace progressivism, go through the storm. Instead of running away from the storm, go through the storm into whatever comes next. We don't know what's going to come next, but we have to do it.
Yeah, I mean, to make a kind of practical appeal in this sense for Anglicanism, you can see there's a kind of Anglicanism has this kind of fun aspect where we embrace some elements of Calvinism and then rejected other aspects. And if you had to have one, talking about the societal impact of religious beliefs, you had to have one, test experiment on how ideology or religion, like which produced the most successful societies. The British Empire, has a lot to say for itself, not for nothing. And it was the only Anglican country in the whole world, and it did very well. So, I mean, you could talk about like Anglican civilization and how it's had an effect on American society or not.
Oh yeah, Anglicanism. The British Empire made the world succeed more than anything else. The British Empire is based.
Yeah. And a lot of it actually was tied to like evangelical expansion. A lot of the empire was preceded by Anglican, evangelism efforts in a lot of these places and countries to convert people. If you actually read, there's a book that I actually really like called Things Fall Apart, which I had to read for school. And it was like, I'm in a public school and like the East Coast, it's kind of liberal, you know what I mean? I'm like, oh, a book about like colonialism in Africa. It's going to be interesting. But then I read it and it's actually really based because it's written by actually an African guy. So it's not like hyper focused on all of the stupid politics we're focused on. But if you read Things Fall Apart, there are Anglican missionaries in that story. It's like set in like right before the colonial period of Nigeria, before the British actually imperialized. But the evangelists show up and you can see the like cultural tension between the worldview of the evangelicals or the evangelists and the missionaries and the like locals. And it talks about like all of the non-religious differences of their way of living that some of the people who convert to Christianity start adopting, if that makes sense. Like the civil culture, they talk about how they're a lot more self-conscious about things that aren't even moral. Like, how do I explain this? Like, if like when you clean your house, cleanliness, people say cleanliness is next to godliness, right? Whatever, but it's not actually about sin. But they would point out that people who converted to Christianity, because they were already trained to look at themselves for sin and virtue and all these other things, started caring more about cleanliness and orderliness and all these other things in their society in general in a secular sense. And so you can see there how religion does have an effect on the way we live our lives. And of course, that's kind of Max Weber's observation about Calvinism, the Protestant,
Yes.
all that stuff. So
yes, based Calvinist work ethic.
Yeah.
I just my whole worldview is just summed up in 3 words, which is stop running away, basically.
Yeah.
And you probably agree with this. The most based people are grown in the soil of wokeness. People like us.
Yeah.
You went to public school, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and like a pretty woke public school at that in New Jersey. So
Yeah, so woke public schools have raised so many more conservative young men than Republican activists ever have.
yeah.
So that's why I think like whatever the next successful thing for the kingdom comes, wherever it comes, it's going to come from some super woke place. I don't think it's going to come from rural Alabama or Bulgaria. I think it's going to come from San Francisco or Massachusetts,
Yeah.
or someplace that has burned down and the ashes are going to create fertile soil.
Yeah. Let me float an idea by you that I've been thinking about. So
Yeah.
Jordan Cooper talks a lot about like gentlemanliness and etiquette,
Yeah.
and that like kind of the weird fact of our society right now is that there actually really isn't a conservative elite, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So like, even in like when we were kids, right? Say like John Boehner is a good example, but like there used to be like even a Republican Party establishment where there were like families and dynasties and stuff. I'd say in some sense, oh gosh, Liz Cheney was kind of the last of this, but even Liz Cheney, John Boehner, they were kind of thrown out from the bottom up of like a grassroots, like Tea Party conservatism, which is really wary about elites and these kinds of people and compromise and all that kind of stuff. And so in a weird way, there's kind of a vacuum of elites. And that's where we're seeing a lot of like other characters, I won't name any names, that are kind of popping up to be like pseudo elites again for the like kind of conservative Christian America. And some of them are really based, some of them are not. And I think in a weird way, like people from liberal, previously elite parts of the country, like Jordan Cooper is a great example. I think he's from Connecticut.
Yeah.
And like we've talked about coming from like liberal high schools and stuff like that, like are kind of slipping into Jordan Peterson is kind of like this, right? He was a professor in a university, a very blue-coated environment, if you will, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
They're kind of seating themselves in or being chosen by fiat or democracy, if you will, to kind of be the fill the elite gap in our society. And I think Christians need to be more conscious of that, because I think I think that's actually why we're seeing a kind of growth in magisterial Protestantism, a kind of return to Roman Catholicism, more intellectual traditions, or even just more historic, hierarchical Christian traditions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and Jordan Cooper would agree with me here, but we need Christians to become a lot more elitist. We need Christian, and that's why, like, I will straight up say the North is superior, the Northeast is superior, Ivy League institution. People need to see the value of institutions because it's elites that make change. That's why we need to encourage a lot of Christians to go to Harvard and Yale and those places and get into the positions of power. Even if you have to like not pretend to be woke, but whatever you say, make sure you can survive in a woke environment, because wokeness is going to eat itself eventually. And then there's going to be a blank slate for something new. So yeah, we need to always be in elite environments, no matter what. Because we need a new Constantine, and Constantine was the most elite you could have.
Yeah. I think that there is this kind of vacuum of elites, and I think I saw a graph the other day of people were surprised, like if you actually polled people that sit in ELCA parishes, like the mainline Lutheran Church, the majority of them voted for Trump. Still, of the people in ELCA parishes, but in the Episcopal Church, it was only like 30% voted for Trump. So like significantly, it was like the only denomination in America that had like that strong of a skew. And I think part of that is because Episcopalians were more tapped into the elites of that, if that makes sense, of like our society. And Trump is just this very anti-establishmentarian character. And so even like more Republican leaning Episcopalians were still like the type of the kind of what are they, Lincoln Club? I forget what those people are called. The people who are like the never Trumpers. Like that was a pretty common demographic even amongst Republican Episcopalians, but because they're elite conscience. And I think there's a feeling that like even like, I don't know how everyone feels about Trump, but he's like a very not elite, typical elite character in that sense. And some people like that about him, but I think
he's just a typical right-wing populist. Same with like Boris Johnson and that Brazilian dude. Right-wing populism never really achieves anything. It like flares up briefly. It gets a few, charismatic people in power briefly, and then it wears off. I'm not a right-wing populist. I'm an elitist. We need to all be elitists. Yeah. And it doesn't matter if it's Democrat or Republican, because the Republicans are pro-gay and pro-abortion now, and because the Republicans are just 10 years behind the Democrats. We all know that. Yeah,
I think that's actually, and it's like, what do we consciously do about that? Like another thing I've noticed is kind of wearing off is, 10, 20 years ago, actually probably more than that, there was still enough of a cultural kind of conservatism to make sure that like people who are Democrats still had kids and like had families and got married, and liberals still did all those things that like continue the species, if that makes sense. But that's just like straight up not happening anymore. If you look at like college enrollment, there's like a huge freeze right now because 18 years ago people didn't have kids. So like if we don't, and the people that didn't have kids skew like, and whatever you want to say, Democrats have on average higher education than Republicans. And so in a weird way, we have like no like elites, if that makes sense.
Republicans and conservatives lose because they're poor and uneducated and not elite, and that's why they lose, and they run away from it.
We don't even have a self-replicating elite, if that makes sense. Like the people in our society who would otherwise be in charge are literally not reproducing. Like
we don't have a single decently respectable university. Like the best conservatives have is Liberty and Hillsdale, and it's like those are respectable within conservative bubbles. Harvard is respectable all across the board.
Yeah, and that's true. And here's my pushback. Right, I do think what'll happen is in 50 years, the conservative bubble will just be demographically more of a proportion of the population. So like,
but there's always the first estate, second estate, and third estate. Like the peasants really don't matter. The voice of the peasants doesn't really matter. Yes, there are a lot of evangelical peasants, right? But they're peasants. They don't have sway in the institutions. They're not in control of the media. They're not in control of the institutions. They're not in control of the universities. We need to control the media and the universities and the institutions, and that's what matters.
I think someone's probably going to clip that and then send it to like the PC USA leadership or something. But no, that I totally agree. I think, I don't know, this makes me think about, like Angel Studios.
No.
What?
No, I don't know what that is.
Angel Studios, they're like the people who do The Chosen and like the Cabrini movie, all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's actually funny because I think that there's this thought. Here's my defense of Reconquista too. There's this feeling, if we do have these separate institutions, those separate institutions will be explicitly Christian. They'll be like aggressively good advocates for conservatism. I saw the Cabrini movie, and I don't know if anyone liked it. It's fine. It was a well done movie. They never even like she never even says Jesus's name or like spreads the gospel. She just like helps people and does charity in it. And it's like she's a saint. Like there's literally a scene where a woman is like sitting in her bed. She's a former prostitute, and she's like, nothing could ever make me clean. Like I'm like forever gonna be shameful. Like I'm a horrible, dirty person. And the literal nun looks her in the eyes and says, "No, honey, like deep within you, there's something beautiful that you'll never lose." And literally does not mention Jesus in that scene. And it's like, are we like separating and starting our own institutions so we can do like half baked, like like chat therapy or whatever? You know what I mean?
I don't think you should separate and start your own institutions. That's not what the reformers did. Before anyone asked that, they took the institutions with them. Like, I'm more concerned with preserving institutions than preserving denominations. They just sort of happen to go along with each other. But there was the old light and new light split during the First Great Awakening. Do you know about those?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the old lights were like, they took education very seriously and qualifications, whereas the new lights were starting their own log colleges, and the qualification was basically how emotional your experiences were. And that directly parallels mainline and evangelical. So when people argue...
was that if we are going to split off, you should at least be actually based, but a lot of times it's not even like fully committed to that. It's still like half-baked stuff. And I think that there's actually literally no point. There's no even argument anymore for splitting off if you're still going to be half-baked and you're still going to be, just whatever the mainstream was doing, but 10 years ago. And I do think a lot of split offs do that. I think people, I'm in the ACNA and I'll defend the ACNA, but you always hear the criticisms of it, that it's tech 2.0, all that kind of stuff. So like, you're always going to have this battle.
Maybe. Now, a lot of times people, I have to go, so it's good that other poll arrived. One last thing I'll say.
Perfect timing. As soon as I came.
Last thing I'll say is, a lot of people will say we should invest in these offshoots because they're going to be demographically bigger than what they split off from. Like, it's true. Pretty soon the PCA will be demographically bigger than the PCUSA. But clip this if you want. Like I said, the peasants are always the majority. Evangelical offshoots are peasant denominations. Mainline denominations are elite denominations. So it is better to control a small elite than the masses of peasants, because appealing to a majority of peasants, like, Trumpism, that's an Anabaptist mindset. That's the evangelical mindset if we just have a pure majority of peasants. I'm not interested in... evangelicals evangelize peasants. The left evangelizes institutions, and that's why the left wins. And that's where I'll head out.
All right, you get to say your little spiel. I think it's interesting because other Paul is a based neutral mainliner technically.
Yeah, that's true. I just wanted to, especially before you go, Richard. Oh, okay, never mind. Well, I still say here. I just wanted to point out and appreciate the irony of two Jewish guys talking about retaking the institutions in the media. I think that's it's a beautiful full circle of the narrative. I can absolutely get behind that. But actually, one point that Rich brought up, which is actually extremely true, is how, as good as it is that the peasants are the majority, as he calls them. I could say so much more about that, but I don't want to get you demonetized. But, he's absolutely right. Where yes, even if the majority peasants stay the majority because they're actually creating kids and what have you, in the end, the peasants in themselves won't actually make change just because they're the demographic majority. That's completely true. Because when you consider political history, not just political theory, but even just political history, and the kind that's talked about, like my friends on the Contra Mundum podcast, for example, they're basically Christian nationalists. The thing you notice with history is that in some, Hegel's right about the great men of history. That is what guides history. Obviously, great men are contextualized by a wider context that's made up of people and driven by them and what have you. But ultimately, the great changes of history, all else being equal, unless it's like a natural disaster or what have you, are pushed by particular men who have the will and the power to make such changes. And so no matter how big of a majority the peasant class gets, as long as the elites are always exclusively of the enemy, then there's not going to be policy-wide change. And even more importantly, and something that actually adds urgency to it, is the fact that also that most people really are followers, which is why, not really principled, which is why even like not too long ago in the United States, the majority of the nation was against same-sex marriage. Suddenly, after Obergefell, that completely flips. It completely flips, and it's not because people are principled; it's because people like they follow the crowd and they follow what the elites tell them. So, and it'd be nice. Would it be a nice ideal for us to change that so everyone is a critical thinker and can oppose this stuff? It would be, and we should work our best towards that. But all else being equal, there's always going to be a massive contingent of just followers in the lower levels of the people, and so we need to act accordingly.
Yeah, and gosh, I was looking into the French Wars of Religion, and bear with me as I give a little bit of a history lesson, but I think it's actually really valuable. Right before French Wars of Religion broke out, people thought France was going to become a reformed country. Like the Huguenots were like expanding massively and evangelizing, and were quickly going to become a majority, literally just by doing like Bible studies and stuff. Okay,
Yes.
and like converting people, and a lot of it, people will talk about they went to the like nobility, and a number of the members of the royal family had become reformed and stuff. And what this did was it created a reaction of elites in Paris, especially, who were like arch Catholics. And even those arch Catholics or arch Romanists were super like over worried about the growing Huguenots or whatever. And so they were like, we have to like purge and kill them all. And even most centrist, quote unquote, Romanists, like the Queen, so the Queen Catherine de Medici, actually opposes the radical Catholics and sides with the Protestants during the French Wars of Religion, because she thinks that they're being too violent. Like they want to kill all the Protestants, and they're no holds barred. Okay. And so there was even opposition from people who were like both trying to do a both sidesism, if you will. But if you look at France today, okay, it is a Roman, it was historically, I guess. Now it's probably an atheist country. But it ended. The Protestants lost because the institutions just decided to persecute them, and then they died, and then they all had to flee. So, like, there is a sense in which you could kind of be like, oh, look, we've got the numbers, we're growing, guys. It's all going to be great in like 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah, and then St. Bartholomew's Day comes around.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and if you look into that, that's again, it's another example of where a lot of
that was the Red Wedding, basically, of France.
Yeah, and if you look, like even Romanists, again, like Catherine de Medici is a great example. We're like, oh, this is too far. You can't do that. What if the other sides, both sides is a moment, but then they just won and said, sorry, lol. Cope and seethe, basically.
Yeah.
And that's all that ended up mattering at the end of the day. And then France went back to being a majority Roman Catholic country after that.
Yeah, and then Descartes, and then socialism.
Revolution. Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. Versus compared to, like, if you look at the same time period, literally the exact same years in the Netherlands, the local Dutch nobility literally just revolted against the Spanish Roman Catholic persecution, which was actually more intense at different periods of time. Kind of, it's debatable, than the French one, but they just revolted, created their own political rebellion institutions, separated as a country, and fought the Spanish and won, and that's why the Netherlands is a Protestant country today. That's really.
I like how you say that. Someone pointing out in the comments are revolted.
Yeah.
Guys, I'm revolting.
Yeah.
The 31-year-old revolter.
Yeah. Exactly.
No, he charged me 1 ducat extra in my taxes. I'm gonna revolt, guys.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's enough. That's enough red pilling my audience for now, I guess. Yeah. I don't know if you've looked into originally allegedly this stream was going to be about Superlapsarianism, I guess. But
yeah, is that your idea of chill?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess we can just talk about anything. Yeah. Speaking of ducats, I hear you've been playing some Crusader Kings.
Oh yeah. I love CK3. I never started playing number 2, but when I saw, I was always interested in it, but I was kind of a bit intimidated by the complexity, and I was like, I couldn't be bothered learning all that. If I'm going to get into a super deep and complex strategy game, it's going to be one that I'm dedicated to. And so I basically decided to plant my flag with CK3, and I'm doing pretty gangbusters in that. And I'll probably move on to EU4 as well, which is like, as far as I'm aware, like the most complicated one of the Paradox lot. Although it's similar enough to CK that I can probably get the ropes of it pretty well. But yeah, I love it, and I'm doing a series in it right now, stream series to restore Pastor Jim's Bible Church over Christendom. And you can actually do that. You can literally either found a brand new religion or a brand new like denomination, if you will, of an existing tradition, and call it whatever you want. That's exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah. No, I was a big Paradox game enjoyer, like since I was in high school. So I'm a big CK2 fan. You know, I've done all from a CK2 and EU4 and those map painting. I also love EU4. EU4 is based because you can just be Anglican. In EU4.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I'm so excited for that. I'm gonna once my CK3 series is done, I'm gonna make that my next series on the strategy game thing, the EU4, like just Anglican world domination.
Yes, exactly. But the problem with getting into those games now, like I started playing those games like 10 years ago, and as DLC came out, I like bought the next one and the next one and the next one. But now if you got to go back, like it's got to be some like hundreds of dollars to get all of the DLC for those games retroactively. So it's like totally not. I mean, it's worth it. They're fun games. I mean, but it's not worth it. No game is worth $300 or whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the thing is, a bit controversial on my part, because on the one hand, I followed a lot over the years the whole controversies of big publishers like trying to price gouge people with their games, like exorbitant DLCs, microtransactions, especially. Those drive me up the wall completely. And yeah, preferably, obviously, yes, I prefer that my games be cheap and they have minimal amounts and costs of DLC, so it's still a reasonable price. But to be a bit controversial, I guess, I think really almost everybody kind of in a way they think they kind of undervalue the entertainment from games. Like say you get let's say it is a good strategy game or a good RPG game, you can easily get hundreds of hours of entertainment out of that, right? But then let's say the base game plus all the DLCs, it is multiple hundreds of dollars. And all else being equal, people are like, oh, it's ridiculous, it's so exorbitant. But I don't think anyone realized, like, just think about it. So you pay $300, maybe even $400+ for all the DLC of this game, and in return, you get hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of entertainment from it.
Yeah,
I mean that's actually good in my opinion. Like we're used to games being a certain price, and that's why we complain. And there's justification to that, because certainly a number of publishers really are just trying to get money for money's sake. But just with that context out of the way, purely in an objective manner, a few $100s for thousands of hours of entertainment is worth it.
Yeah, actually, compared to like a book, I always think about this, but like there's some books that are like $60. You read them once through, you basically got it. Like you can reread a book if you want, but like from the average book, you know, the reread value is minimal.
Yeah, exactly.
Versus like a video game, a lot of especially these map painter games, like they're the infinite variation pretty much means keep playing them for decades.
Oh, that's me. Actually, I'm gonna check my Steam right now. How many hours have I got? I've got one for Stellaris, which that's my most played Paradox game. Easy. The role play potential in that is insane.
I love Stellaris.
I've got 1,652 hours.
Oh wow, yeah, Stellaris, you got a lot more than me. Stellaris, I only have 187, but I'm about to raise you. My CK2 hours are probably going to make everyone in my audience unsubscribe and cry because of how much a loser I am.
Oh yeah.
But no, continue CK2. 1,681 hours. I guess that's
pretty much the same. Yeah.
Yeah, 1,682 hours. That's some commitment. I'm in it. Let's see what my EU4 hours are actually.
Actually, is there a way to see
1,100?
Is there a way to organize your games by most played on Steam, so I can see which ones I've played the most?
Yeah. Well, Hearts of Iron 4 I need to update because for some reason, so it's not showing me my hours, but
I've got a few hundred hours in Skyrim, of course, although that's divided between the original game. I've got almost 600 hours in the basic original game versus 183 hours in the special edition.
Oh gosh, if I added up all my Paradox games, because I've got 618 hours in Victoria too.
Whew, dang.
Dude,
Actually,
I'm a
Gary's mod.
Paradox
That's one I've
fiend.
had. I've had Gary's mod for like actually 10 years now. That's insane.
Yeah. Oh, I love Gary's one. They never
Only
talking about. Yeah.
only 559 hours. I guess that makes sense because it's not like
Gosh.
yeah.
Yeah. Only 559 hours. What's that like? Like
For a game
weeks?
that I've owned for 10 years now, which is
Yeah,
insane to
that's
think
true.
about.
Yeah. No, that
That's not
is a lot
nothing.
though. I know, dude. I love games. I'm such a game fiend. Ever since I
Oh
started
yeah.
this channel and like it's become my kind of thing I do in my spare time instead of like because I'm in law school right now. So like
Nice.
now I realize I don't really play a lot of video games. I guess I play Minecraft if I do play video games.
Oh, I can't. I don't think I could even count how many hours I have in Minecraft. Like, I don't know if
Yeah.
there's any tracker or anything. I hope my account has some kind of like metadata or something for hours played.
I think you can like at your Microsoft. Gosh, wait. Here's a real callback. How much did you pay for Minecraft?
Oh, just like 30 Australian dollars.
Yeah, so I paid $8 for Minecraft in like 2008 when it was still an alpha.
That's an 8.
As a middle schooler or not as an elementary schooler, I bought Minecraft like way ahead of the curve. And like I was
This
playing
would
the game
been
before there
like
were beds or you were there was food in the game. Like I'm a deep Minecraft lore enjoyer.
that would have been. Was it even? I thought like the very first public versions were like 2009, like an InfDev.
Oh, that's possible. Because there's like there was the Minecraft alpha, and then there was Minecraft beta, and then there was the like actual release. I remember watching the like live release of technically Minecraft 1.0. Minecraft alpha release date. Yeah, 2009, 2010. Yeah, I was in elementary school then. Maybe I'm still a young Anglican, okay, guys? I'm still young, but yeah, in 2010. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually remember. So I got it in 2011, and I literally have like photographic memory of the day in school in 5th grade when my mate told me about this game called Minecraft, and it's the best thing ever. And then my mum walking me home from school, and I was like, "Hey, Mum, can we get Minecraft when I get home?" And she's like, "Yeah, sure." And I got it that day, and I still have a borderline photographic memory of my first world and my first night. I was crapping my pants at nighttime. I was dying constantly. But here's the thing: I had the luckiest start ever. And so this, by the way, this is in a beta 1.5. That's when I got it. And I started on an island, died a few times in the night. I didn't look at any tutorials because there wasn't even any tutorial in the game. So I eventually looked at the tutorial that every old school Minecraft player looked at. Paul Source Jr. How to Survive Your First Night. I swam over to the mainland from my spawn island. I built my house there. My first ever staircase mineshaft. Everyone always makes that to start with. My first ever staircase mineshaft. A few blocks down, I find a dungeon.
Ooh, and that was super. Dude, there was like not that there was nothing in the game because it didn't feel like that at the time, but like there was so much stuff that is now in the game that wasn't then.
Yeah, it's a different game basically.
But the dungeons were like super cool because that was like still one of the only cool dynamics. Like when you went down into like it was getting diamonds, finding cool dungeons. There wasn't even the Nether yet, you know. Oh,
yeah, exactly. And honestly, I'm happy to say that for the most part, unlike some games out there where they just bloat the material, I think there's a few like bit like a couple of features or two are like, it's not really the same, doesn't have the same vibe. But on the whole, honestly, the updates, even under Microsoft, have been really good.
I totally agree.
The best by far being the most recent ones of the overhaul of terrain generation, including deepening the world limit and the addition of the deep dark. Those are absolutely genius changes.
Yeah, the
Deep Dark's a horror game now. It still scares me now.
Yeah, no, Minecraft's great. The way that I found Minecraft was as a youngin, I was really into World of Warcraft, and you would be like, "What's the link there?" But I literally typed in, like, I had mistyped Warcraft, and whatever I typed in, it came up Minecraft, and I was like, "What the heck is this?" And I thought it was related because there's like StarCraft, Warcraft, craft games, and I was like, "Oh, this is related to those games." Amazing. And I found just went down a rabbit hole of what Minecraft was, and again, it was $8, and I literally had enough in my own personal child being a kid savings that I handed my mom the money, and she used her credit card.
I just imagine, I just imagine for some reason like a Disney version of you, like super tiny short kid with the sweater and tie and like the massively oversized circle glasses, and you're just like,
Yes. Oh, dude. And then I got Minecraft, and I had to convince. I had a friend who I like played all my games with. Like, if I had a game and he didn't have it, it was like I was never gonna play it. I had to convince him to get Minecraft too, and it was fun because you could. We had to get still like Hamachi to do servers. If you remember that phase of Minecraft.
I have not heard Hamachi in years. Oh my word, that's a
Yeah.
throwback, bro. That's a core memory. Oh my word,
Yeah.
that thing
Yeah.
was a nightmare to manage. It was
Yeah.
such a
Oh,
nightmare.
it totally was. Gosh.
Gosh, I've not heard that word in like maybe even a decade plus. That's
Yeah.
insane.
It was like Log Me in Hamachi or something like that was what it was
It was
called, and we had
something
to
like
use that
that.
to
Yeah,
get the
yeah.
server to work so that you
Oh
could
my
have
word.
a Minecraft server,
It
and
was
then
such a pain. And now you have either Realms or
yeah,
you can host on something like Apex or one of the
yeah,
other
or just
ones.
LAN if you're
Which
just all
I intend to host my own fan server on Apex. So that's gonna be mad.
yeah, that'd be fun, yeah. That'd be great. Dude, Minecraft's great because it's so, open-ended. Oh, dude, I'm about to get into my speech about Fallout New Vegas. Have you ever played the Fallout New Vegas?
I played it a bit.
Yeah,
I've played more Fallout 4, but I'm more Skyrim and Oblivion.
yeah. And this applies to Skyrim and Oblivion too in a way. But I think one of the things that all games, in my opinion, exist on a spectrum between Minecraft and a Telltale game. Okay? So like
Okay,
there's
I get you.
where it's like a very sandbox. It exploits, in my opinion, the things that only video games can do, which is like emphasize choice, emphasize you doing your own thing, and then the like story driven, like, the joke I always say about Telltale games is that your choices end up not really mattering anyway, right? Because like the ending ends up being the one ending anyway, and you thought that like, oh, I picked person A and then or over person B, and it's just really who's standing in the background in the cutscene at the end of the game.
Mm,
But that's a story, and it always bugs me because I'm like, you're not really playing a game. You're watching a like show basically, and you just happen to walk
yeah.
around. And
Yeah,
in my
exactly.
opinion, Fallout New Vegas, this is my hot take, is actually the perfect balance. And actually, to be fair, so is Oblivion, and I think Skyrim does this well, of like the story element and like the character interactions, but still in a way that emphasizes player choice, which is something that's unique to the medium of video games, that actually makes it like the embodiment of the medium. If that makes sense. Like it's the pinnacle and the fulfillment of the medium of video games in a way that yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think.
I think one game that did it so brilliantly because obviously there's the eternal problem where you have a sandbox game with player choice and player interaction. Mass Effect's really fun.
I love Mass
Honestly,
Effect. We can talk about Mass Effect.
the opening scene to Mass Effect 3 is one of the greatest video game cinematic openings ever.
Yeah.
I freaking love it so much. But
Yeah.
there's the eternal problem in developing a RPG sandbox game that nonetheless has a set campaign. Where how do you balance player freedom and let them at least think they have some certain meaningful degree of choice and interaction without breaking the campaign, basically. And Paradox does, for the most part, the tried and true, just literally make invincible the essential characters in the campaign and what have you. But I think what they did earlier in Morrowind was absolutely brilliant, where you could kill, or at least the essential characters could die, but when they died, a little warning came on your screen that said, with this character's death, the thread of prophecy has been severed. Reload to an old autosave or persist in the doomed world you have created. I think that goes so hard. Like, you get like some supernatural, hey, you done goofed. I'll take it back. They need to bring that back, honestly.
I totally agree. The reason I think Fallout New Vegas is a great example of like the pinnacle of this is in Fallout New Vegas, you actually can kill every character and you don't even get the pop-up. You can kill, like, there's a character named Caesar who's like extremely plot relevant. And if you kill him, it just affects the story. Like he just is dead now.
Wow.
And the story changes with him being dead. And
That's
versus
awesome.
if he lives. And because also there's an event in the game where he can die later and it just makes it seem like he dies earlier. And he can also live during that event as well. So you can kill House earlier than the storyline you kill him. I think they just worked into this plot everyone could die so that Yeah.
That sounds like an Obsidian thing, because don't forget, New Vegas was Obsidian. It wasn't
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
Bethesda, properly speaking. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just great. First of all, I want to address this comment. Wait, no, that's the wrong comment. Minecraft is the Anglicanism of video games
So
because
true.
Anglicanism is based and Minecraft is based. So
Absolutely,
important.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's something for everyone within reason.
Yeah, absolutely true. There's adventure and there's like house building, you know, whatever. Anyway.
So true.
Also,
there's a horror game now. If you go to the Deep Dark, like it's actually. Have you been to the Deep Dark?
Yeah, I haven't been to the Deep Dark, but I have been to an Episcopal church, and I think they're probably.
Well, replace Well, I think there's a bit of a difference, because obviously the Episcopal Church is headed by Slanesh, whereas the Deep Dark is more. I don't know the other chaos gods. It's just like Lovecraftian horror, basically. Like you will actually, when you go to the Deep Dark, you will be like your heart will be pounding the whole time. And if you set off, you know how it works, where like if you set off the horn, like the shouting horn, like 3 times by sound in the Deep Dark, that summons the warden.
Yeah.
So how it works in the Deep Dark, there's these things called skulk, I think.
Yeah.
And what you have to do, anything that like moves makes sound, quote unquote. They set off those skulk things, and those can actually be used to make redstone signals if you get them. But importantly, sound also travels between these skulks, like in a network if they're nearby. And the worst thing is that there's this kind of like white bone looking horn thing every now and again in the Deep Dark. If a skulk signal hits that, it does this like horror screech, like this loud horror screech, which kills me every single time. And if that sounds 3 times, the warden like comes out of the ground, and you need to like get the heck out of there. And he can only hear you by sound, but it's still freaking terrifying.
That's so cool. Isn't there a bit I've seen memes about? I haven't been to the Deep Dark, but I've seen the memes about people using pistons because the warden sees by sound. So like you can just use a piston corner.
I haven't seen those, but that makes sense. Yeah, you can fool around with him a lot with the sound.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that definitely seems cool. And actually, I would say the reason I think the expansions of Minecraft have worked so well is that they're mostly all optional. So like you're never going to get overwhelmed by them. Like you don't have to like know what they are immediately. Like even all the Nether expansion, you don't really have to go to the Nether. The expansions that went on in the caves. Actually, probably I guess caves you'll definitely interact with if you play Minecraft at all. New block types are always fun. Yeah, Minecraft's great, man. I love Minecraft. Oh, dude. Okay, this is a great question. I don't know what this is actually asking about, but were you a PlayStation kid or an Xbox kid?
Well, funnily enough,
the
first proper console we got in my family was a PS1.
Ooh.
I remember my brother playing that a fair bit. I think every once in 12,000 years, I got a turn on that on Tony Hawk. And then we got
being a little kid. I had older siblings too.
Yeah. Then we got the PS2 after that. That was when the PS2 was really when I started gaming proper. That was with like Lego Star Wars, the first one.
Oh, dude, yes.
The Finding Nemo movie tie-in game, of course.
Mine was the Happy Feet movie tie-in. That was the game I was playing on my
Actually, did I get that one as well? I'm actually not sure. I forget.
Yeah.
And then
there were so many more movie tie-in games of that day. I don't know why. There was a Shrek one that was pretty great on PS2.
I think I played that at a friend's place. Yeah. And then also Lego Star Wars 2. Like right when that came out, my parents got me that as like an early birthday present. So that was great. But then it moved. Then we moved on. We eventually got rid of the PS2. I don't know why, but we got an Xbox 360. And I play more. I play the Madagascar movie tie-in game with that. That was my favorite. One of them at least. But I've played a few games, and it's been so long that I'm trying to remember what other games I played. But one that I played a lot, I think it was probably my most played game in the 360, was Skate 3. That was so much fun. Much fun. And I got it again maybe like a couple of years ago or something when we had an Xbox One, and I just played it on that.
Yeah. Dude. I had a friend who had an Xbox who'd skate, but I was the PlayStation family. I had to inherit most of my gaming consoles. So like I was playing a PS1 weirdly later than other people. Like, and then eventually we got the PS2, but that was kind of later than everyone else. And like inheriting other people's games. There was a Star Wars game I remember playing with my older brother on PS1 where it was like Obi-Wan on the cover or whatever. And then there was a PS2 Revenge of the Sith game that was also awesome.
That was so fun.
Yeah. And the problem is that the disc doesn't work anymore. But then like Battlefront on PS2, that was great.
Yeah. Oh, mate, Battlefront. That's
all
a throwback.
those were awesome.
Actually, how many hours have I got on Battlefront 2 on Steam? I'm gonna see that.
Mhm.
So I have it on Steam, not the classic collection stuff. That I've got 229 hours. Very nice. Very nice.
It does have the cool alternative endings because you can do the final battle at the end of the Revenge of the Sith, and you can make Anakin win and all that stuff. Oh, those were great.
That's the ending that every boy wants.
Yes. I know, because you're an edgy kid. Anakin's just so much
better. Every boy, honestly, I reckon every boy secretly rooted for the Sith and the Empire.
Because they got cooler vibes. Yeah. And then you grow up and you're like, oh my gosh. The struggle.
Wait, the Empire actually was right. that wasn't just me being a kid. We were onto something.
Hilarious. Gosh, yeah, Battlefront 2 is great. What else was on PS2? Yeah, there was a Shrek game. I remember it's all the tie-in games. Like, because I had a Ben 10 game. I had Ben 10 was big. Ben 10 was big.
Ben 10, I remember the show. I used to watch that so much.
Yeah. I feel like we're about to find out we're the exact same age. How old are you?
24.
24. I'm 23. So,
oh, wow.
There we go. Look, we got two young Anglicans. That's so funny.
True. Very true.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Sith have cooler vibes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Goth boys. Yeah.
Oh, that's another one. On the 360, The Force Unleashed 2. I played that a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. The first one I played a little bit, but mostly at other people's houses. But the second one, even though it was like just one tiny campaign and nothing else to do that, I still loved it. I just kept playing it over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Even just the main theme. Oh, that's so... That's the stuff.
Those games are great. They're honestly, in my opinion, more canon than the sequels. So I think that.
No, I 100% believe that. I think it's genuinely, you can genuinely and meaningfully set a cutoff for canon. It's not like an arbitrary thing like, oh, I just don't like it. It's like, well, no, it literally came under new management and new writers and everything. And we know that it went to crap. So for me, Force Unleashed is canon. Lego Star Wars is canon. Yeah, it just is.
Yeah,
but honestly, the actor, he got like a mad career with Star Wars. Sam, what's his name? Sam Witwer or something. So he played Starkiller in The Force Unleashed. He played Anakin in the Clone Wars, and he played Darth Maul.
Yeah, he did play Darth Maul. I knew he played Darth Maul.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so cool. Yeah, he did, and he's kind of cool, and he's like kind of a super nerd. There's like there's like the weird last hope of the Star Wars stuff under Disney is like him and Dave Filoni and those guys who do some occasionally good plots in the new stuff. Yeah, for sure. KOTOR. I don't know if you played Knights of the Old Republic. I had that too.
My brother played it a lot, especially KOTOR 2.
Yeah.
I didn't play it much. I played it like a little bit in more recent years.
Yeah. I have to admit, it was one of those games that I bought. I was a kid, and it's kind of a point and click adventure a little bit, and I lost interest. And like I didn't really play it, even though I had it. And then people like I grew up and people were like, "This was the best game ever," and I was just like, "Probably." I don't know. I was like a ADHD, like the basic iPad kid before that was a thing. So I needed like my fun, colorful lights and no slow stories. Oh, speaking of Kingdom Hearts, did you play Kingdom Hearts as a kid?
No, I never played Kingdom Hearts.
Oh, dude, those are great. I love Kingdom Hearts too.
Oi, Jubal has a mad idea. Paul, you should have Subumbra game with you on Twitch. I'd be so keen with that.
Yeah.
I just need to figure out though, because I still haven't figured it out. I mean, in fairness, I haven't gone deep into it, but just how to have someone with me on a stream without there being like delays and what have you in the game and the call, if that makes sense. Or maybe I'm just overthinking it, and maybe it's just as simple. I just need to figure out how to do that.
How do you stream to Twitch from StreamYard, or is there
from OBS? I use I have like an OBS profile and everything for set up for Twitch, so that it even has like a little chat, transparent chat on the side while I game. Yeah. And speaking of my Twitch as well, so it's every week on my Fridays, but I alternate between my CK3 series and my Minecraft series, which I just started up.
There you go. I can play either of those, honestly.
And the Minecraft series is called Upon This Block.
Oh, there you go.
I am a genius. I know.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think it's so
that's
funny.
one you could join.
Yeah, I love Minecraft. I definitely do Minecraft. I think it's interesting. I'll notice that when like news outlets comment on Redeemed Zoomer, actually, they always mention that he plays Minecraft on his channel, and that he's appealing to like the youngins through Minecraft, like he's infecting their brains through the
That's it.
pixel blocks and stuff. But I feel like most of the videos that actually get traction aren't even his Minecraft videos. They're like his little explainy videos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those do pretty well.
Lethal Company stream. I played a little bit of Lethal Company, but again, I haven't had as much time to game, unfortunately, lately, which is kind of sad. But yeah.
I'm game for that Lethal Company if I can figure out the multiplayer streaming thing.
Yeah. Lethal Company's fun. Lethal Company, well, I guess because we can't talk the whole time, but maybe that's for the best. I need to stop yapping sometimes. You know me. I know I started a chill stream and was like immediately started yapping about the logical order of God's decrees. So
I want to. Oh, okay. After a couple of seconds of watching a Redeemed Zoomer Minecraft video, enter a hypnotic state, and by the time the video ends, you magically agree with everything.
Yes, especially if you're under 13, so he can like particularly poison the youth, I guess.
You know what he needs to do? I think Richard, if you're watching this, or if you talk to him afterwards, you need to record a session, either of you or someone else, whatever, just doing some absolutely ridiculous, like autistic pro level, parkour in Minecraft.
Yes.
But you have your calm theology talk over the top of that.
Yeah, he kind of is like that. If you ever watch some of them, like he's just building, he'll fall off, he'll die, and he doesn't even mention the fact that
no, but I mean like pro, like insane parkour. It's just completely distracting from what he's talking about.
Minecraft parkour is also such a thing. I from what I understand from like memes where you'll see at the bottom half people are doing Minecraft parkour, and it's like a video of like, I don't know, Joe Rogan or something. That's still a thing. But I feel like Minecraft parkour was like big in 2012.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I haven't gained. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I need to whatchamacallit, to praise Skyrim so much more, just because that game and Oblivion, but arguably a bit more so with Skyrim, the atmosphere is unparalleled in virtually any other game. Like the world design, the little details and effects in the world, in the natural environment around you, plus the Jeremy Soule soundtrack, which is basically just Howard Shore 2.0. It's just the atmospheric feeling in that game is utterly unparalleled. Like, I want to be there. I want to go there. Minus the dragons, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we'd still have to do our Elder Scrolls stream, but
Absolutely.
we can talk a little bit about Elder Scrolls because I do.
Yeah.
And something I always wrestle with, and you'll see some like Elder Scrolls purist lore people who will point out that like lore established for Skyrim in previous games is different than the lore you get in the actual game of Skyrim, and some of it seems cooler, whatever. And people point this out about Oblivion too, where like, oh gosh, I'm forgetting what the name of the imperial capital is, but
Cyrodiil.
Yeah.
Province. That's the province, yeah.
Yeah. Like the city is described as being huge and all these like different districts in a book in Morrowind, and then you actually get there and it's like you can walk.
Well, in fairness, that's more so just the game design limitations,
But they're fun games. I think the thing I always want to say about them in their defense is like, tell me, especially with Skyrim, tell me you won't remember the first time you had to do that. You accidentally fell into that Redguard side quest where there's like the woman and the guard and everything, and you had to right and deal with that. And like you were, at least for me, like when I actually remember playing that for the first time, I was like genuinely like, oh dang, what should I do? You know what I mean? Like,
I just turned her in every time. Actually, there might have been one save where I saved her. There may have been one, but every single time otherwise I turn her in and get some nice gold.
That's so funny.
Romans 13, guys, come on.
Yeah. And then dude, there was a playthrough. So like one of my thoughts, and maybe you can agree or disagree. Something I prefer about the previous Elder Scrolls games to Skyrim is that you're just the main character and the chosen one in Skyrim, and the world like kind of does revolve around the Dovahkiin. At least the story does. Versus to some extent, Oblivion is cool in that your character can be like a nobody, but the chosen one at the end of the day is actually not you. Like you have to find the chosen one guy and like help him do stuff. And so you can kind of like role play being a bunch of different characters, not famous. That's another thing. Versus in Skyrim, like my thought was it might not be possible to just be like a nobody. If that makes sense, like just a kind of functionary and like something, because you're literally the chosen one. But I tried to do a playthrough where I was like I forget where I wasn't the Dovahkiin, where I like, because I know the plot, like I deliberately avoided going to all the places where you get the shouts, and you can play the game that way. You can. You actually can just go ahead of all that stuff and go to the different towns and do the plot, as long as you don't go to Whiterun, pretty much, and talk to like the Jarl.
Oh, great! As long as you don't go to like one of the good cities, then just...
you can go to Whiterun. You can't go to do the plot in Whiterun with the Jarl.
Yeah,
with Jarl and that stuff. Like you can still do the warrior, or what are they called? That like
the
clan or whatever.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. The guild, the warrior dudes. Yeah,
the ones with the werewolf subplot.
Yeah, that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's
I was talking about how Fallout New Vegas is the best game of all time.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's a preference thing in the end. If you like a chosen one storyline, Skyrim's your thing. If you're not quite a fan of that, Oblivion's your thing. They both do it. They both do it very well. And you know, it's funny, people complaining about the change of lore in Skyrim. I haven't seen the examples myself. I haven't paid much attention to that. But the funny thing is that the lore change from Arena, the first game, to Daggerfall was massive as well.
Yeah.
In Arena, they didn't even, as far as I'm aware, they didn't even have Oblivion and Daedra. They didn't have like the Aedra and Daedra pantheon system even in Arena.
Was there religion in the?
I don't know. Maybe there was, but like that lore basically all developed after Arena.
Yeah, interesting. Well, yeah, I haven't even looked into like Arena and Daggerfall. I never played. I mean, I have Morrowind, but I've never really done a playthrough of Morrowind, unfortunately, even though it is a good game. But Oblivion and Skyrim are the ones that I've actually played like through and had a character and stuff.
And Jubal, so yes, it is Sunday morning here. I actually went to church earlier. I had just gotten home when I came on the stream after, did church, then had a brekkie at my favorite cafe, then came home and hopped on here.
Nice. Yeah, it's nice to have the weekend off. Yeah, I'm in between finals right now, so all the videos that have been coming out, I pre-recorded, but I've been studying and I need a break, so that's why we're doing a chill stream.
Am I talking to a recording right now?
Yeah, no. Yeah. Brekkie after mass is peak. True.
100%. And the best part, this cafe I only found just last week because my mate from not too far from me, he came to visit my church with me last week, and afterwards we're like, hey, let's have brekkie somewhere, because I've never gotten like a brekkie feed after church except like a KFC Go Bucket. But so I was like, no, let's get a proper like brekkie place. So I just looked it up on the map, nearest places, and I randomly found this place, a cafe that's near the river, near my parish. And I'm like, okay, let's go check it out. I haven't seen this place before, and I was hoping they had the usual big brekkie meal that other cafes have. That's like eggs, hash brown, bacon, sausage, all that stuff. And we went there, we got our coffees, and we got the meals, and yeah, they do super good, and even better, it's actually run by a devout like Romanist guy. He has like, if you look at his back wall, he has like pictures of Jesus, Mary, Saint Charbel, and all that. And he found we're Christians, so we're getting along with him really well as well. He opened up asking us, because we had our crosses on, and my mate did, and I had my Bible with me. And so he asked us, "Oh, what denomination are you guys?" And we're like, "Oh, Anglican." And he's like, "Oh yeah, mad awesome." So he was one of those really, really sweet, devout, but really sweet, open kind of Romanist, like the spirit of Vatican II, but in a good way.
Yeah, I've noticed in real life, online, like rad trad cats can be like, Anglicanism is crazy, I hate it. But then in real life, most
Yeah.
the average Roman, devout Roman.
Yeah,
Catholic
yeah. And this guy's
is
devout.
different.
He wasn't a normie. He had the
Yeah.
pictures of all those things. He loved to talk about his faith, loved Jesus,
Yeah.
and he had like the miraculous medal on as well as he's working. So like he's the devout bloke.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a coworker at a job I did over the summer who was a devout Roman Catholic, and she always was surprised to be like to have conversations with me because it was like in her mind it was like Roman Catholicism and then like evangelicalism, and then I was like, oh, I'm Anglican. She's like, what's that? And then and she's like, that sounds actually pretty cool and based. I was like, yeah, it is. It's called the One Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Thank you very much. So,
oh, it's not Romanism. That's offensive, Paul. Don't call us Romanists.
Gosh, I wanted to ask you about that conversation with Trent. I think he got what you were saying, and I made I comment under that video.
And it was the briefest single moment in the whole interview. And so many people just got their panties in a twist. I'm sorry, I'll just be straight up about that. Over that one tiny comment and just ignored everything else.
I know. And then there were comments like, you think you can call us Romanist, but you don't agree to the category of Protestant. And it's like, no, the point you were trying to make in the video was Protestantism is a category that's not equivalent to Roman Catholicism.
Yeah.
Anglicanism is a category that's equivalent to Roman Catholicism.
But also I also did argue that even then Protestantism, precisely because of how how there's countless different definitions of it, that the term itself is an issue. It's not hypocritical because I'm not offended when someone says Protestant. When someone says Protestant, I'm like, oh, how dare you? I'm not like that. I'm a man. I've got testosterone. There's nothing offensive in itself about it. I'm just saying that intellectually, the term it's both. Even if there is a tight definition for it, it's a category error to compare it to Rome, for example. But in reality, it doesn't have any tight definition at all. So it's a useless term that just complicates things. So it just should be retired.
Also, I mean, I was thinking about this because there's on Anglican.net. I remember reading this guy talking about. It's like this, English Civil War period, and the question of the pamphlet is Presbyterian, Catholic, or Papist. Obviously, Catholic in that is referring to. And the bit is it's just all contextual. Like where you are in time is where one word versus Romanism and Papism are actually more specific. And in a way, if you think about it, imagine if a Presbyterian got mad because you're like, oh, you're associating our entire denomination with our polity. They don't think that way. They're just like, that's reasonable. That's a distinctive of our denomination. Papism, in the same way, is your polity includes the Pope.
Yeah, exactly. Rome is still supreme. All these people like, actually, this guy doesn't know about Eastern Catholics. Yeah, they still have the Pope in Rome, you dingus.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, this one guy was like absolute. I don't know if it was a guy or a girl, but absolutely hysterical about my term Romanist because, well, for one, I responded with the obvious thing. Well, hang on. Romanists came up in the same polemical context as Lutheran, Calvinist, and what have you, because those terms were used to distinguish the other side as like an erring sect and not as truly Catholic. So they're not calling them Catholics; they're calling them Lutherans or Henricians or Calvinists or Romanists. The terms were all exactly equivalent in that respect. There's nothing especially offensive. Of course, I always got the reply of, oh, but Lutherans and Calvinists and blah, blah, blah accepted the term, so it's okay now, but Romanists still derogatory towards us. But I just respond with, well, then that just proves my point, that the term itself is not inherently derogatory. It just takes the will of people who accept the term, and it's not derogatory anymore. And guess what? I know many Romanists who are fine with the term. I use it regularly with them. Yeah. So you don't represent it. But there's one person who is so hysterical about it. Like, this term was associated with persecution of my ancestors, of my Catholic ancestors, and blah blah. And I just reply to him or her, mate, that is absolutely rich. My own spiritual and physical ancestors in England were persecuted. Read about Nicholas Ridley. Yeah. What happened to him?
Yeah, huh? I know. Yeah, and also it's funny because they'll call I think there's actually 1-to-1s for Romanism, Anglicanism. Same. Yeah. They're talking about the nation of origin associated with the entire denomination. Nobody in Nigeria, when you call them an Anglican, is like, excuse me, actually.
I am actually Nigerianist. Get it right.
Even if they're like Kenyan right, and they're not even, say they're in Kenya or whatever, right? They're not going to be like, actually, I'm a Kenyan right Anglican. You should call me. No, what I'm saying. But it's a little silly, and then that's a 1-to-1 with Anglicanism versus like the term Presbyterian, Episcopalian, Papist. They're just polity descriptions. They're descriptions
Yeah,
of how
exactly.
the church is governed.
Now here's the thing: where they would have a point is if the common term for Romanists and Romanism and what have you were already an equivalent sounding term like Anglican and Lutheran, but I just insisted on using this term that most people think is derogatory or what have you. That could be justifiably a bit sus with that. But here's the problem, though. The whole reason why I'm using that is because the normal term that we use with them, whether it's Catholic or Roman Catholic, is linguistically loaded. It's granting them on a linguistic level a special claim over something which we don't grant to them and which we claim for ourselves. And so the common reply I'm often giving to those people in the replies is basically just telling them straight up, look, you're demanding that I use your preferred pronouns. That's exactly what this is. You are telling me you are demanding that I recognize your identity of exclusive Catholicity, and I don't. No, I don't accept
Roman
that. I'll call you
Catholic in bio.
I'll use a fair term that recognizes what you are, Romanist. And I won't use anything else.
Yeah.
Or, and I said with one person, I will gladly call you Roman Catholic if and only if you call me an English Catholic.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, gosh, I also kind of lament the fact that in the Anglican world, Anglo-Catholic specifically means like a very specific type of Anglican Christian.
Yeah, just the LARPers.
Yeah. And I'm pretty high church. We can talk about this in a second. Also, I want to address this comment before we move on. Would the reformers excommunicate young Anglican for rejecting the filioque? I no longer reject the filioque. I always have all my old videos from like when I was kind of a wee babby in theology. I want to clear the air. Filioque is based. Filioque is true. I was just kind of an Eastern Orthodox simp at the time, and so that video is up and it exists, but I'm not exactly proud of it. Oh, I lost Paul. I can keep answering little questions and stuff. Yeah, I agree. Romanism hijacks Catholicism like Easterners hijack Orthodox. And actually both parties can recognize that the other group does this. Does that make sense? They can recognize that. Hold up. I don't know if he muted on purpose or not or whatever, but if he wants to message me to unmute him, I don't know if he whatever. Yeah, he's back. Never mind.
Yeah, and that's why I do exactly the same. Sorry, it was just my dad didn't need to talk to me. I do exactly the same with the I kid you not. He just because I told him a while ago that I'm wanting to get a second monitor so I can have dual monitor set up. So while I game, I can look at chats or vice versa and what have you. He literally just brought in a monitor from like somewhere he picked up just for me. So that's awesome. But yeah, I do exactly the same with the East. I don't call them Orthodox because I claim that I don't think they're Orthodox at all. It's actually, and my rejection there is actually kind of stronger because with Rome, as strongly opposed to much of their theology I am, and that it really can lead you to hell if you consistently believe the whole thing. Nonetheless, I think I recognize some place of their church institution with legitimate succession and what have you. And so in a very loose sense, I can grant that they're Catholic, which is why if I'd be fine with calling them Roman Catholics if the other person was to call me an English Catholic. With the Eastern Orthodox, though, I just, nah, just nah. Just nah.
Yeah. And I think it's funny, too, because Coptic Orthodox will use the term, or what's it, Oriental Orthodox will use the same term Orthodox, but they disagree on what Orthodoxy even is. So it's obvious in those examples that the term is just colloquialized, especially because we live in a time where, like, the vast majority of people using the labels are not, like, they're not concerned about the theology, right? Like the random person in your street who asks, where's the Catholic Church? Like they don't care about what the word Catholic means. They probably don't even know that it's like a Greek term that means of the whole or universal or whatever. They just are associating it with history or whatever. And the same thing when they say Orthodox Church. So to claim that they're like some authority, you always see all those people who quote, I think it's St. Augustine, who's like, oh, when everyone asks where the Catholic Church is, they point to our churches. That shows that we're correct. And it's like, of course, if you did that, if that was the case, you would flaunt that as the fact. But it doesn't actually prove anything. Like, theologically, it's just a old Catholic.
Whenever someone mentions Orthodox churches, they point to those Eastern bros.
Yeah. And a Romanist would be able to accept the fact that they disagree with their claim to be Orthodox in the same way we disagree.
Exactly.
Yeah. 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 Trying to make sure I read all the comments and stuff.
There was a comment from a long while ago. You don't have to bring it up, but someone asked, like, what's your theory on what Tom Bombadil is in The Lord of the Rings?
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
And I'm genuinely interested in that because I don't know if people haven't seen on my channel, I actually interviewed C.R. Wiley, who wrote In the House of Tom Bombadil. Really, really good book that basically covers that issue. And we talked about that as well there. And I'm quite convinced that he's basically one of the Ainur, one of the pre-creation divine spirits. He basically has that kind of power.
Yeah. I have my weird theory too, and this is totally uneducated, and you can give me your whole full theory in a second. Tom Bombadil, in my opinion, is the Jesus insert in the story. And you're like, what? But the bit is, in lore, he's like not tempted. His voice, his word scares away all of the evil deeds, the evil demons, all that kind of stuff. He's totally perfect. He's not exactly Jesus, of course. He has a consort, all that kind of stuff, right? But like, he's this embodiment of the word and like purity and nature and creation, if that makes sense. And he's not a part of the story in the same way the other characters are a part of the story. So like in theory, why doesn't, and like they even bring this up, if I'm not mistaken, like they want to just give the ring to Tom Bombadil, who's not, you know, what's it called? Tempted by the ring at all, and just why doesn't he take it to Mordor? He can scare away demons, all that kind of stuff. But it's kind of like a separation of, like it's a distinction of kind in him that makes it like this isn't even his purpose in the story.
Yeah,
I don't know, he's like a meeting in the middle of the extra textual and the intratextual, maybe even author insert kind of character. Because even Gandalf is tempted by the ring. So
yeah. I'm a bit different. I don't really think he's much of a Jesus archetype as he is, and I mentioned this in the interview, as much as he is a pre-fall Adamic archetype. He's basically he and Marigold are basically the pre-fall like ideal on display. That's how I view it.
That makes so much more sense. I think that's totally accurate. Because I always wonder why does he get a hot wife? Why does Tolkien make a big deal out of Tom Bombadil getting a hot wife?
Yeah, because it's like it's just a thing of like it's basically that area, well, except for that one tree about to kill the hobbits. But apart from that, it's like his territory is basically like the Edenic paradise, and he and Marigold just like it's described in there, but talks so brilliantly written how he describes it by Tolkien. Well, Tolkien describes it as like every day is like as joyful as the last, or even more so than the last, and what have you. Where they are, and he's just singing and happy and all that. But at the same time, he's also known as the master of the forest, and Marigold herself calls him by master based. And but what's
Goldberry,
so
not Marigold, right? It's Goldberry.
How that's sorry, Goldberry, not Marigold.
Yeah,
Goldberry. I'm sorry. But what's so a really profound and brilliant thing in that chapter, other than obviously Tom Bombadil just casually playing with the ring, which is like what the heck. Other than that, something that's genuinely profound by it is how that it's explained that he's called the master of the forest or something like that. And then the hobbits are like, oh, so he controls the trees or what have you. And then Goldberry just looks at him weird, like, no, he doesn't control the trees, but he's the master.
Yeah.
And it's like he let everything he lets everything to its own. He leaves everything to its own. He doesn't control them, and yet he's the master. And what's so profound about that is how it defines what it means in like the perfect ideal, basically, to be master, where it's not the direct puppet controlling, but rather you let things be as they are naturally, and yet you have the power. You nonetheless have have a potential at least over them, for good. Like case in point, the tree is about to basically kill the hobbits, but then Bombadil just like whacks it and like, hey, let go of him, and the tree lets go.
Yeah.
So it's a really profound look at like what basically the ideal of authority is. It's something that's there in a potential. It's like a centering. It's kind of like a centering pinnacle point of like a system, but it doesn't. Again, ideally, it doesn't direct everything directly.
Yeah,
that was
I
really
think Supralapsarian man is definitely kind of a lot better of an analogy there too. I completely agree, because like then there's the idea of like he chose righteousness. He's not tempted by the ring. He's not sinful.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
But I think with that chapter, when I knew of the chapter and that people were like, why the heck's that there in the Lord of the Rings before I read it. But when I got to the chapter and I read it, I just loved it the whole way through.
Yeah.
And even though I could see it was clearly like a weird disconnect from the story, I nonetheless knew the first time I read it how it makes perfect sense in the story, how it fits in, even though it's like literally like a complete divergence.
It is,
Because it's precisely because it shows those extremely profound themes really early on, but in very subtle, cryptic ways. Well, cryptic to the modern mind, that is.
Yeah.
But when you get those themes and understand it, even though it's technically not directly relevant to the rest of the story, you nonetheless see, okay, wow, that is extremely profound, and nonetheless reveals some of the deeper workings of the world in a number of ways, if you will, and some other profound things. And so I genuinely believe, I've come to believe since then, that the litmus test for someone who has a rightly...
Keep talking. I'm getting a call from my wife. I'm going to answer this.
All good, all good. So I've come to believe, welcome to the other Paul, everyone, that the litmus test for the rightly ordered mind, someone who has a mind according to oriented towards principle, towards truth, goodness, and beauty, who has a genuine love for creation as God made it. I think the litmus test for all those things is your reaction to the Tom Bombadil chapter. If you genuinely enjoy and understand that chapter, all else being equal, your mind is rightly oriented. That's the way. That's how I see the chapter. It's really a test, if anything, for the reader. And I obviously pass with flying colors because that's just honestly one of my favorite chapters in the whole book. And I'm a bit more than halfway through the Lord of the Rings right now, and it's still one of my favorite chapters in the whole thing, just because of the beauty it describes. It's just beauty. It's just it's just something you're supposed to enjoy and ponder about and meditate on. It's amazing that way. Joe chair exposed. It's the Joe chair, guys. We've got exclusive Joe chair lore, guys. Oh, mate. Sheesh, I just saw a pretty disturbing news thing, but anyway. Dwusa almost done the Two Towers book. I finished 3 books based. All right, so what I was mentioning when you left is that I believe the Tom Bombadil chapter, a person's reaction to that chapter when they read it, is the perfect litmus test for whether they have a rightly ordered mind. Like, if your mind, I'm dead serious about it.
Yeah.
If your mind is genuinely oriented towards higher things of truth, goodness, beauty, of love and appreciation for nature as nature, wanting to see order and harmony and what have you, if you genuinely love those things, you will love the Tom Bombadil chapter. But if you're of the modern mind, you'll be like the many people who are like, why is that chapter in there? It makes no sense. Yeah, it doesn't make sense because you literally can't comprehend it.
Yeah. It's actually so interesting you say that, because I went from the people who didn't appreciate those chapters to someone who, on re-looking at it like last year, especially like even the Shire chapters, I remember like the first time I read it, I was like, oh my God, this takes so long to get to like relevant anything. Like I used to be so upset about it. It made it hard for me to like get through the Lord of the Rings books when I was like going through them the first time. But then like a year ago, I started reading the Lord of the Rings again, and I went through it again, and I was like, the point of like the Shire chapters, for example, and even the Tom Bombadil chapter is actually the point that eventually, oh gosh, I'm forgetting his name. Boromir's brother, Faramir. Faramir makes explicitly to Éowyn, where he says, like, there has to actually be something we're fighting for. Otherwise, the fighting has no point. Like, it's just pointless. Like, so when she's like, oh, why can't women and children fight? He's like, well, then if everyone's fighting, like, there's, there's no point in fighting at all. And so the whole point about the Shire, I think, and like the pettiness of it is like, another thing I didn't really appreciate the first time through is realizing how much Bilbo is like ungrateful. If that's the way he's being portrayed in the beginning, is that like his biggest concern is all of his relatives like want a piece of his inheritance, and this petty little drama that if you just want the like Lord of the Rings like massive epic story, you'll be like, who cares about this little distraction?
Yeah.
But actually is a kind of like window into like regular English life. You get the sense that like Tolkien had written The Hobbit and it was this fun, cool adventure, and like Bilbo is like his self-insert, right? And then you have to just go back to being a normal like country English bumpkin or whatever, and it's like, oh, this is boring. But what he's actually saying is so much, and it's so important to me, I think, that this is like actually the foundation of modern fantasy, because he's kind of saying, oh, we have this genre as a thing, but we can't let it make us not appreciate the actual value of real lived like communities
exactly.
that have this kind of serious beauty to them. Like think about the way the Shire is consistently portrayed as this beautiful community and like idyllic like reconciliation between nature and industry and all those kinds of things and like civilization.
Yeah, exactly. The whole book is supposed to make you, or rather, it's enjoyable when you have it's supposed to foster an enjoyment of just the little things, just the little ordinary things in life. Like during the journey, multiple points, whenever the hobbits are stopping or whatever for the night, he'll spend like 1 or 2 pages describing supper. Just like for ordinary people, again, who are just like for the flipping nerds of the modern day, like the self-appointed literary critics who are like, that's not relevant to the plot point, why don't you bring it up? But for normal people of an older mindset, it's just like, I like that. Wow, look at how he describes the tomatoes or whatever. It's just you enjoy every little thing because it's actually creating a whole world and the whole everything you can appreciate about it. It's not just about rushing to the relevant prop points or what have you. It's kind of like people with that modern mindset, they think that anything, analogically speaking, anything in a story apart from the bones is irrelevant. Just the bones that give the direct structure and the actual direction, those are the only things that are relevant. And anything else is just superfluous, don't have it, it's a distraction. Whereas real storytelling, as in The Lord of the Rings, is you have the bones that ultimately guide everything in the single story, but you have all the meat and tendons and muscle around it that gives flavor and richness to it.
Yeah. And actually, people talk about Tolkien as a world builder, but I think a lot of modern fantasy has world building in a way that doesn't have a point, but even Tolkien world building does have a point, if that makes sense. Like we're talking about how he's kind of celebrating. Like another thing in those early chapters is like he goes into the different like Hobbit families and like the history of different Hobbit civilizations, like the Proudfoots and the Blackfoots or whatever they're called. And there's like the different hair colors and statures and builds associated with different Hobbit clans and stuff like that. And how the Tooks are adventurers that, and then the Brandy Bucks are not, like they're the normies or whatever. I can't remember what the families are. But like if you talk to any, and this is I've noticed this in my life, like on the East Coast or like places in America, like the Eastern Shore of Maryland or like Virginia, with like older families who have been in America for generations, they talk kind of like that. They have like, oh, this group of us who have lived in this town, like we're very like this, and our ancestors are very like that. And you can grow up with a kind of pettiness for that. And I think generations since then have thought of that kind of stuff as petty. And I think that's the way it kind of comes off originally in Lord of the Rings. But the point is that like actually what they're doing is they're imbuing their ordinary life and identity with incredible meaning. And that's something that Tolkien, I think, is trying to emphasize as a little kind of adventure. If I'm gonna butcher the lore, but like there were adventurer hobbits in the past is kind of what he's saying, and we're the inheritors of that adventurous lineage or whatever, and we can either live into it or we can ignore it, basically. Like there's one who invented golf, if I'm not mistaken. Like there's like little funny jokes in the genealogy of the different hobbits, but the sense of place and people and like cultures that actually have value in themselves, as a culture, as a thing. Like I don't know if you've ever read Tolkien's essay on the 20th century, but his main gripe with totalitarianism is that it erases cultures. Like he talks about that a lot, like that in the Soviet Union there were like Russians, and Russians had this culture and they were like that. But what the Soviet ideal was like to just make everyone the same and interchangeable. And that the Germans, they just wanted to conquer everybody else and make them German or get rid of them. And that was bad too in his mind. Which, I think we kind of resonates with our modern view of totalitarian regimes, but it's actually a little refreshing too, because you can think of like, I think he compares it to Napoleon. Napoleon wanted to make everyone French, Enlightenment people. And that was the same level of badness or same kind of villainy to Tolkien, because of his high view of culture. He makes fun of Esperanto as well. I don't know if you guys know what Esperanto is.
Really? Does he?
Yeah, he says so like Esperanto is this, for people that don't know, it's like this not fictional, like people made up this language as a universal language so that the thought was people would be able to speak it. It was actually almost the language of the UN, but France used their veto power to make it not the language of the UN.
Thanks, France.
Yeah,
actually, ironically, France W there.
Yeah, or maybe it was a League of Nations or something, but basically utopians in like the 20th century thought this was going to become like the world language. And he talks about how it will never succeed. It's like a dystopian language. The idea that there would be a language not attached to a people, like with a history, and like a mythology and stuff. And that's like, that would basically be how humans died and like were forgotten forever, as if we actually all started speaking this totally deracinated language that has no links to mankind in our history.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Foster's right. Rare French W there.
Yeah, I know, yes.
But yeah, completely right about that. It really is. I think Tolkien did desire basically to create a foundational mythology for the English peoples, and he completely succeeded in that regard. Yeah. It's one of the greatest mythologies out there, period.
Gosh. And people always talk about like, could there be an American equivalent? Or I don't know if people talk about this with Australia, but like there's not, like even Harry Potter has that kind of strong sense of place that a lot of, I think, like American fantasy doesn't have. Like there's no one saying fantasy in America with like America vibes in the same way. I don't know. You could talk about like Rip Van Winkle, if you know who that is. I guess that's like early American like fantasy.
American myth is just Mel Gibson's The Patriot.
Yeah. But just like that just doesn't exist. Versus
Transformers is American.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of
Autobots. Yeah. We must side with the United States military.
Literally true. I don't know if there's an Australian equivalent. Like isn't there like I want to say there's like a children's book with like flowers and fairies or something that everyone likes in Australia. Maybe I'm messing that up, but gosh, I'm gonna have to look this up.
There's a lot of children's books like that.
Yeah, it's like a classics children's.
Australian myths. I mean, like we have our cryptids and that, like the
Yeah, I guess we've got cryptids too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Australia is just an English colony, so we're basically with the English people in that regard. Same myth, I guess. Yeah, I just like to identify with the English heritage or what have you. Like I fully adopt that, especially in recent years. I've taken my English heritage a lot more seriously, and so I consider the English peoples my people, and consider the Lord of the Rings my myth, basically. So
yeah, based. I know. I always think about this. So and maybe I'll be the guy that does this, but there is in like the King Arthur stories, right? There's this weird idea about Avalon being kind of west of England, and like over the seas, like you'll sail this over the ocean and you'll arrive in this island that's kind of ideal. And even in like people talk about like Vinland, like in Norse mythology, there's this idea that somewhere west of us, there's this kind of idyllic mythical place. Like the Holy Grail in one of the stories is basically like Columbus, John Cabot, like there's a bunch of people that go over the Atlantic Ocean and they end up in the island with the Grail. And so you could do like an extension of like the Arthurian legend. That's like kind of a proto-America, if that makes sense, and kind of connect that mythos and expand on it, and kind of have a cool kind of like Arthur's like sleeping in the mountains and he's gonna wake up and lead the country in the future. You could have a character like sleeping in the Appalachian Mountains or whatever, and he's gonna wake up and like restore America.
Well, yeah. Now we have America, the great mythical paradise of Taco Bell and Arby's.
Yeah, and not for nothing, it's kind of weird because like America is distinct from English, like Americanisms and things like that are kind of distinct. We're kind of more like hokey. Like I always think of a Huckleberry Finn. Just the name. It's like it's very American. Like it's just a very like earthy, grassy, flowery, like kind of like you can see Huckleberry Finn like with not like barefoot walking around like in the, in the reeds or whatever you want to say. And it just kind of got this American aspect. Tom Sawyer, like just the names are very American, but there's also that link to like English Anglo-Saxon heritage as well. And like if anyone's ever read the book Albion Seed, but like even the like little nations that play themselves out in American history kind of have their roots in English nations. Like people will talk about how like New England was kind of just Puritans, but just like unhinged Puritans, like going wild in the Northeast. And then like the South was kind of like the Cavaliers replaying themselves. I have a video about this, which is just me spurging out, talking about American history. But yeah, I think yeah, I'll stop myself before I go too far in this conversation about American heritage or whatever. But yeah. Yeah, maybe we'll talk about this too, but I don't know if you've ever played After the End, but there's
I haven't, but I was literally told about that in my by one of my fans in the Twitch chat to play the After the End mod.
Mm-hmm. It's great. There's an After the End CK2 mod, and the history of it's interesting. And I think that's what makes it good. Actually, we're talking about myths and After the End. And I think there's actually like a place where they meet, but originally, as far as I understand, After the End of the mod, the map was made and like randomly generated by one guy. And then it wasn't like really complete or finished. Like there was some stuff, there was some lore, and then another team of people kind of like, what's it called? Like, oh geez. What's it called when like other people take up the project?
Oh, contractors?
Fan fork. There's a fan fork of it. That's actually the one we play a lot of the time. And people like slowly added to the lore over time, and it was kind of a collective project. And so in that way, it's more like actual myths where like, people kind of take it out of a single author's hands and it's kind of crowdsourced. Yeah. And so the lore of it is quite cool. Yeah.
It's something I want to show you actually, which you will freak out over in a good way. Let me just try to pull up the image.
Yeah, Washington Irving, Edgar Allan Poe, Mark Twain, Nathaniel Hawthorne. Yeah, these are great. Mark Twain's kind of weird. Washington Irving is based. I like Mark Twain, actually. I shouldn't say that, but yeah.
Where is it? Should be. Gosh, come on. Trying to find the thing is so difficult. There we go. All right. Share my screen.
Yep.
So you know what map that is, obviously?
That's Skyrim, right?
Yep. Well, it's Tamriel. It's a whole Tamriel. Now what game is that?
Oh, Bolivia? It looks like there's a Cyrodiil
Civil
War. Oh. Elder Kings 2. Oh, that's what you mean by what game is it? Yeah, that's CK3, right?
Yeah. It's a complete Tamriel, and as far as I'm aware, lore accurate as much as there is lore for the places. CK3 Tamriel mod. Yeah. So, like, if you notice there's the different great houses in Morrowind that have their territories.
Yeah.
You got the different areas in Skyrim. You have different royal houses over Cyrodiil, and of course you got the High Elves over the is it called the Somerset Isles, or am I confusing that with the other? I don't know. Just their place. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a complete Tamriel conversion mod for CK3.
Yeah. One with the samurai. Yeah, that'd be cool actually. If we're gonna do a Twitch stream, maybe we'll do CK3 after the CK3 Elder Kings 2. Yeah, I guess it's Elder Kings 2 because there is a CK2 mod that's called Elder Kings.
Yep.
Yeah. No, that's all base. All right. Anything else you want to talk about in the chill stream before we maybe wrap it up?
Not really. I think I need to get on some video work as well. Anyway.
Nice. Yeah, that was fun. I'm getting tired.
Cool.
Here it's like late. I know for you it's probably like lunch.
It's only just past like lunchtime.
That's funny. Oh yeah, but we've got big things in the works. We'll keep it a little hush hush, but
Oh yeah, 100%. We still need to get the flipping. Well, have we for that thing that shall not be named? Have we settled on the meeting time?
I think we have actually. I think,
okay,
yeah.
great stuff. I'll message the group to confirm that. All right.
I think that was a good stream. All right, see you.
Cool.
See everybody. Thanks for the nice stream.
Catch you later, Joe. Catch everyone else.
Later.